Your life is shaped by conversations you barely remember. The salary you accepted without negotiating. The opportunity you didn't ask for. The boundary you didn't set. The dream you quietly postponed because you didn't want to seem demanding. Most people think negotiation happens in boardrooms. They imagine suits, contracts, and intense meetings across polished tables. But the truth is far more personal and far more powerful. Life is a series of negotiations. Every day, in ways both big and small, you are negotiating your time, your energy, your opportunities, your relationships, and most importantly, your worth. When you ask for a raise, you negotiate. When you set a boundary, you negotiate. When you ask for help, express your needs, or say no, you negotiate. Even when you stay silent, you are negotiating, by default. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people are losing these negotiations without ever realizing they were part of one. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack talent, not because they lack ambition, but because they lack belief in their own value. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned a dangerous lesson. Don't ask for too much. Don't be difficult. Don't risk rejection. Don't make others uncomfortable. So we shrink our requests. We soften our opinions. We delay our dreams. We accept less than we deserve. Quietly, politely, repeatedly, and over time, this becomes a pattern. The promotion goes to someone else. The opportunity passes by. The relationship feels unbalanced. The business idea stays in your notebook. The life you imagined slowly becomes the life you settled for. Not because you weren't capable, but because you never truly negotiated your worth. Here's what makes this even more powerful and hopeful. Negotiation is not a talent reserved for a chosen few. It is not manipulation. It is not aggression. It is not confrontation. True negotiation is clarity. It is confidence. It is communication. It is connection. It is the ability to understand your value and express it in a way that creates opportunity, trust, and mutual growth. The most successful people in the world are not simply more skilled or more fortunate. They are more comfortable asking. They are more comfortable speaking. They are more comfortable standing in the space of their own worth. And the beautiful part, this is a skill you can learn. This audiobook is not about turning you into a hard negotiator or a persuasive talker. It is about helping you become someone who understands their value so deeply that asking for what you deserve becomes natural. Because the greatest negotiation you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. The voice inside that says, maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I should wait. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe they'll say no. Fear of rejection is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. It keeps people quiet when they should speak. It keeps people still when they should move. It keeps people small when they were meant to grow. But rejection is not the opposite of success. Silence is. Every opportunity begins with a conversation. Every breakthrough begins with a request. Every transformation begins with the courage to ask. Throughout this audiobook, you will learn how your beliefs shape your confidence, how your emotions shape your communication, and how your mindset shapes the outcomes of every interaction in your life. You will learn why preparation creates confidence, why empathy creates influence, why clarity creates trust, why collaboration creates opportunity. You will learn how to navigate difficult conversations without fear, how to express your needs without guilt, how to ask for more without feeling selfish, how to create outcomes where everyone wins, and most importantly, you will learn how to become someone who no longer waits for permission to grow. Imagine walking into conversations feeling calm instead of anxious. Imagine asking for opportunities without second-guessing yourself. Imagine setting boundaries without guilt. Imagine knowing, deeply and unshakably, that your voice matters. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming someone true. Because your worth is not something you must earn before asking for it. Your worth is something you must recognize before communicating it. And once you do, every conversation changes. Every opportunity changes. Every possibility changes. This is your invitation to step into a new way of communicating, a new way of thinking, and a new way of living. Welcome to the journey of negotiating your worth. Welcome to Limitless Listening, the place where powerful ideas meet calm focus and meaningful growth. Here on this channel, we explore the most inspiring lessons from motivational and personal development books, transforming them into immersive audiobook experiences designed to help you grow while you relax, commute, or unwind. Take a deep breath. Find a comfortable space. Allow yourself to slow down and truly listen. Because growth doesn't always require rushing. Sometimes it simply requires reflection. Each audiobook on this channel is created to help you build confidence, strengthen your mindset, and unlock your full potential in every area of life, from career and finances to relationships and personal purpose. If you're ready to learn, reflect, and expand what you believe is possible for your future, you're in the right place. Now, let's begin today's audiobook journey together. Chapter 1. Life is a negotiation. Most people hear the word negotiation and immediately think of boardrooms, contracts, high-pressure deals, or two people sitting across from each other trying to win something from the other side. They imagine suits, handshakes, numbers, strategy, and tension, but the truth is far bigger than that. Negotiation is not something that happens only in business. It is not reserved for executives, lawyers, or sales professionals. It is not a rare event. It is life itself. From the moment you wake up, life begins asking things from you, and whether you realize it or not, you begin responding. When your alarm goes off in the morning, there is already a negotiation happening between your goals and your comfort. When your responsibilities call, there is a negotiation between discipline and delay. When you speak to a partner, a friend, a colleague, a boss, a customer, or even to yourself, there is an exchange of needs, expectations, boundaries, and desires. Every day, in ways both obvious and invisible, you are negotiating the direction of your life. That is why understanding negotiation is not just a professional skill. It is a life skill. It is a human skill. It is a power skill. And once you begin to see that, everything changes, because the quality of your life is deeply influenced by the quality of your interactions. The opportunities you receive, the respect you earn, the peace you protect, the income you create, the relationships you build, and the future you shape are all connected to how well you navigate those interactions. Some people live as if life simply happens to them. They move passively through conversations, situations, and decisions, hoping for good outcomes. But others begin to recognize that every interaction carries potential, every exchange holds a possibility, every moment of communication can either move life forward or allow it to drift backward. Life is not just a series of events, it is a series of negotiations. A young employee asks for a raise. That is a negotiation. A parent tries to guide a child toward better choices. That is a negotiation. Two friends decide where to travel, how to split responsibilities, or how to resolve tension. That is a negotiation. A business owner tries to secure a better partnership. That is a negotiation. A student asks for an opportunity. A creator pitches an idea. A couple works through conflict. A leader inspires a team. Even saying no to something that drains your energy is a form of negotiation, because you are choosing what gets access to your time, attention, and identity. And perhaps the most important negotiation of all is the one you have with yourself. Every promise you make to yourself becomes a conversation between the person you are now and the person you want to become. When you tell yourself you will wake up earlier, work harder, speak up, take a chance, or finally stop settling, you are negotiating with fear, habit, doubt, and resistance. You are deciding what voice gets the final say. Will you accept less than what you are capable of? Or will you insist on something greater? Will you surrender to the easiest path, or will you persuade yourself to pursue the meaningful one? This is why so many people remain stuck. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack intelligence, not because life has no opportunities for them, They remain stuck because they do not recognize the conversations shaping their reality. They do not see how often they quietly agree to less confidence, less income, less respect, less peace, less possibility. They assume their outcomes are fixed, when in fact many of their outcomes are influenced by what they are willing to ask for, clarify, challenge, or protect. There are people who miss opportunities not because they were unqualified, but because they stayed silent. They did not ask, they did not follow up, they did not express their value, they did not negotiate their terms, and because they did not speak, life moved on without ever fully seeing them. There are also people who lose energy every day because they do not negotiate boundaries. They say yes when they mean no. They agree to things they do not have the capacity for. They tolerate disrespect because they fear conflict. They carry burdens that were never truly theirs to carry. Slowly, they become exhausted, not because life is unfair in every moment, but because they never learned that protecting their peace requires skill, courage, and communication. When you understand that life is a negotiation, you stop drifting and start participating. You stop assuming that every situation is final. You stop treating circumstances as immovable walls. You begin to ask better questions. You begin to listen more carefully. You begin to notice leverage, timing, emotion, value, and intention. Most importantly, you begin to realize that many doors do not open automatically. They open because someone had the courage and wisdom to knock the right way. Think about how many turning points in life begin with one conversation. A job is offered after an interview where someone communicates more than credentials. They communicate presence, confidence, and clarity. A relationship deepens because one person is honest enough to speak from the heart. A misunderstanding is healed because someone chooses empathy over ego. A new level of respect is earned because a person calmly but firmly refuses to be treated beneath their worth. A dream begins because someone makes a pitch, asks for a meeting, proposes an idea, or dares to request an opportunity they have not yet been handed. These moments matter because life often responds to the people who know how to engage with it. Now, this does not mean negotiation is manipulation. It is not about tricking people. It is not about dominating every conversation or winning at all costs. Real negotiation is not a performance of force. It is the art of alignment. It is the ability to understand what matters to you, what matters to others, and how to move toward an outcome that creates progress. It requires self-awareness, emotional control, respect, patience, and courage. It asks you to be clear without being careless, firm without being harsh, and open without being weak. The strongest negotiators are not always the loudest people in the room. Often, they are the calmest. They know who they are. They know what they value. They know when to speak, when to listen, when to hold steady, and when to walk away. They are not desperate for approval, and because of that, they carry a quiet strength. They understand that every negotiation begins long before words are spoken. It begins in mindset. If you enter life believing you have no voice, your words will carry hesitation. If you enter conversations believing you are lucky just to be included, you will settle too quickly. If you enter every interaction afraid of rejection, you will abandon your value before anyone else has a chance to recognize it. But when you begin to understand your worth, when you become clear about your principles, when you learn to regulate your emotions and communicate with intention, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating from fear and start negotiating from self-respect. That shift alone can transform a life. Imagine two people walking into the exact same situation. Both are talented, both are capable, both deserve an opportunity. But one of them thinks, I hope they like me. The other thinks, let me show them the value I bring. One shrinks, one engages, one waits. One asks, one gives away power before the conversation begins. The other enters with calm conviction, and often, that difference in mindset creates a difference in outcome. This is not because life is always fair. It is because confidence shapes communication, and communication shapes possibilities. So much of success is not just about what you know, it is about what you can communicate. Can you explain your value? Can you express your needs? Can you ask thoughtful questions? Can you stay calm under pressure? Can you recognize what the other person cares about? Can you protect your standards without losing your humanity? Can you navigate tension without collapsing into fear or exploding into emotion? These are not small abilities. These are life-changing abilities. There is a story repeated quietly in millions of lives. A person works hard. They are reliable. They are talented. They do good work. But year after year, they remain overlooked. Not because they are unworthy, but because they believe hard work alone should speak for them. Meanwhile, someone else with equal or even lesser ability learns how to advocate, how to position, how to ask, how to frame, how to connect effort to impact, and that person rises faster. This can feel unfair until you realize that communication is part of contribution. The world cannot always reward value it does not clearly see. Learning to communicate your worth is not arrogance, it is responsibility. It is not about becoming self-centered, it is about becoming visible. It is about making sure your effort is not hidden behind silence. But life as a negotiation goes even deeper than opportunity. It also shapes peace. Many people think peace comes from avoiding difficult conversations, but often peace comes from having them. It comes from clarifying what you need. It comes from setting expectations. It comes from refusing to let resentment grow in silence. It comes from addressing problems early instead of allowing them to become patterns. The person who cannot negotiate boundaries eventually negotiates with burnout. The person who cannot voice truth eventually negotiates with internal pain. Silence may feel easier in the moment, but unresolved tension always sends a bill later. This is why courage matters. Not aggressive courage, not performative courage, real courage. The kind that says, I am willing to speak honestly, listen carefully, and stand respectfully in the truth of what matters. That kind of courage protects dignity. It preserves relationships. It creates clarity, and clarity is one of the greatest gifts you can bring into any interaction. When expectations are unclear, frustration grows. When motives are unclear, trust weakens. When boundaries are unclear, confusion spreads. But when people learn to communicate with purpose, so much unnecessary suffering can be prevented. And still, not every negotiation will end the way you want. This is an important truth. You will not win every deal. You will not hear yes every time. Some people will not understand your value. Some situations will not align. Some opportunities will close. But even those moments carry power, because negotiation is not just about getting the perfect outcome. It is about growing stronger in the process. It is about learning how to think, how to respond, how to stay composed, how to ask better questions, and how to leave a conversation with your self-respect intact. Sometimes, the greatest victory is not convincing the other side. It is refusing to betray yourself. Sometimes the greatest lesson is not in getting the deal, but in discovering what no longer deserves your energy. Sometimes the greatest negotiation is the moment you decide that your future matters too much to keep living on default. That is where transformation begins. It begins when you stop seeing yourself as powerless in your own life. It begins when you understand that your voice matters, your standards matter, your questions matter, your timing matters, your presence matters, the way you listen matters, the way you ask matters, the way you respond under pressure matters. These are not small things. They are shaping your relationships, your reputation, your opportunities, and your direction. The world is constantly responding to how you show up. If you show up confused about your worth, the world often mirrors that confusion. If you show up carelessly, the world can become careless with you. But if you show up grounded, prepared, observant, respectful, and clear, you begin to create a different kind of momentum. You begin to move through life with intention rather than reaction. You begin to understand that influence is not always loud. Often, it is the steady force of someone who knows how to communicate truth with confidence and grace, and that is available to you. No matter your background, no matter your past, no matter how many times you have been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed, or silenced, you can learn to negotiate your life differently. You can learn to ask better. You can learn to listen deeper. You can learn to stand firmer. You can learn to speak with greater clarity. You can learn to protect your peace and pursue your opportunities with wisdom. You can become someone who does not simply accept whatever comes, but who thoughtfully shapes what comes next. That is not selfish. That is growth. That is not manipulation. That is maturity. That is not conflict for the sake of conflict. That is conscious living. So as this journey begins, let this truth settle deeply into your mind. Life is a negotiation. Every day, in the visible and invisible moments, you are shaping outcomes through your choices, your conversations, your mindset, and your courage. The question is not whether you are negotiating. The question is whether you are doing it consciously. Are you negotiating in a way that honors your future? Are you negotiating in a way that reflects your value? Are you negotiating in a way that creates better relationships, stronger opportunities, and greater peace? Because once you recognize that everyday interactions shape everyday outcomes, you stop taking your moments lightly. You stop wasting conversations. You stop giving away power carelessly. You become more intentional, more aware, more grounded. You begin to see that the smallest interaction can become the doorway to a bigger life. And from this moment forward, that is how you must begin to live. Not passively, not timidly, not blindly, but consciously. Because your life is being shaped one conversation at a time. And the better you become at negotiating those conversations, the more powerfully you begin to negotiate your destiny. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Self-Worth. There is a hidden force behind the way people speak, the way they walk into rooms, the way they handle pressure, the way they accept treatment from others, and the way they pursue the life they truly want. That force is self-worth. Long before a person speaks with confidence, asks for more, sets a boundary, leads a conversation, or believes they deserve an opportunity, something deeper is already at work. In the quiet place beneath behavior, beneath body language, beneath even skill itself, lives a belief. It is a belief about value, a belief about significance, a belief about whether one's voice matters, whether one's presence counts, and whether one's needs deserve to be heard. That belief shapes everything. Self-worth is not something you can always see from the outside. A person may smile and still doubt themselves deeply. A person may look successful and still feel unworthy within. Someone may speak loudly, confidently, even aggressively, and yet inside still be fighting a deep fear of not being enough. Because self-worth is not performance, it is not image, it is not status, it is not money, titles, praise, or popularity. Real self-worth is the inner sense that you have value, not because life always applauds you, but because your existence carries meaning beyond external approval. And when that inner sense is weak, confidence becomes fragile, communication becomes hesitant, boundaries become blurry, dreams become smaller, people begin to ask less from life, not because they are incapable of more, but because somewhere inside they do not fully believe they deserve more. This is where the psychology of self-worth begins. Every human being is shaped by stories long before they learn how to explain themselves. Childhood experiences, family dynamics, school environments, rejection, praise, comparison, criticism, failure, and emotional wounds all begin writing an internal script. Some people grow up hearing messages that strengthen them. They are told their voice matters. They are reminded that mistakes do not erase their value. They learn that failure is an event, not an identity. They are corrected without being crushed. They are challenged without being shamed. Slowly, they build a healthier foundation. But many people are not raised on that kind of emotional nourishment. Some are constantly compared, some are ignored, some are only praised when they perform. Some grow up in environments where love feels conditional, where silence feels safer than honesty, where mistakes are treated like proof of inadequacy. Others carry pain from bullying, betrayal, abandonment, financial struggle, or years of being overlooked. Over time, these experiences can form dangerous conclusions. I am not enough. I am less important. I should not ask for too much. I should be grateful for whatever I get. I need to prove myself constantly. If I fail, I lose value. If I am rejected, it means I am unworthy. These conclusions do not just stay in the mind as thoughts. They move into behavior. They enter tone of voice. They shape posture. They influence decisions. They become the silent architecture of a person's communication. That is why two people with similar skill can speak in completely different ways. One asks a question with calm certainty. The other apologizes for even speaking. One presents an idea clearly. The other hides behind hesitation. One negotiates from dignity. The other negotiates from fear. The difference is often not intelligence. It is identity. It is self-worth. A person who secretly believes they are a burden will speak as if their needs are interruptions. A person who believes they must earn love through perfection will struggle to be honest when they are hurting. A person who believes rejection defines them will avoid bold action, not because they lack potential, but because they are protecting a wounded sense of self. A person who does not feel valuable will often communicate as if they are asking for permission to exist, and that is a painful way to live. Because life keeps responding to what you repeatedly project. When your inner world is filled with doubt about your value, your outer world often begins reflecting that uncertainty. You settle for less, you tolerate poor treatment, you downplay your ideas, you avoid opportunities. You let other people define the standards for your life, not because you consciously choose misery, but because on some deep level you have learned to expect less than you are capable of receiving. This is why self-worth matters so profoundly. It is not just a soft emotional concept. It is practical power. It influences how you interview, how you lead, how you love, how you recover from failure, how you handle criticism, how you ask for support, how you pursue money, how you set standards, and how you communicate your value to the world. You do not rise only to the level of your talent, you often rise to the level of what you believe you are worthy of sustaining. Think about how many gifted people live beneath their potential because they are trapped in a poor relationship with themselves. They wait too long to speak. They dismiss their own instincts. They second-guess every decision. They chase validation instead of building conviction. They confuse humility with self-erasure. They believe that if they make themselves smaller, more agreeable, more silent, they will be safer. But safety, bought through shrinking, always comes at the price of authenticity. The tragedy is not that these people lack greatness. The tragedy is that they have greatness inside them while believing they should remain hidden. And perhaps you know this feeling. Perhaps there have been moments when you knew what you wanted to say, but something inside pulled you back. Perhaps you stayed quiet in rooms where your ideas could have mattered. Perhaps you accepted less in relationships because some part of you feared that asking for respect would drive people away. Perhaps you have worked hard, delivered results, and still struggled to ask for fair compensation because you were not only negotiating with another person. You were negotiating with your own internal doubts. That is the real battlefield. Before you negotiate with the world, you negotiate with your self-image. Before you communicate outwardly, you communicate inwardly. If the conversation inside your mind is cruel, dismissive, ashamed, or uncertain, that internal voice follows you everywhere. It enters meetings, it enters relationships, it enters risks, it enters dreams, and unless it is challenged, it becomes the lens through which you see everything. This is why healing self-worth is not vanity. It is necessary. It is foundational. It is one of the most important inner works a person can ever do, because confidence is not built by pretending to be fearless. Confidence is built by changing the meaning you assign to yourself. It grows when you stop tying your value to every outcome. It grows when you understand that losing does not make you lesser, that being corrected does not make you broken, that being rejected does not make you unlovable, and that having needs does not make you weak. Healthy self-worth says, I can improve without hating myself. I can fail without collapsing. I can be imperfect and still be worthy of love, respect, and opportunity. I do not need to perform my way into deserving basic dignity. My value is not on trial every day. That kind of belief changes the way a person speaks. When people know their value, they stop over-explaining every boundary. They stop apologizing for every preference. They stop begging to be chosen by people who cannot see their worth. They listen better because they are not consumed by panic. They speak more clearly because they are not trapped in self-erasure. They ask better questions because they are no longer terrified of looking foolish. They recover faster because they no longer interpret every setback as proof of inadequacy. Self-worth creates emotional steadiness, and emotional steadiness creates better communication. This does not mean confident people never feel nervous. It does not mean people with healthy self-worth never doubt themselves. It means their doubt no longer gets the final vote. It means they have built an inner relationship strong enough to hold discomfort without losing identity. They can enter hard conversations without abandoning themselves. They can hear no without hearing you are nothing. They can receive criticism without turning it into self-hatred. They can stand in uncertainty without feeling that their value has disappeared. That is strength. Now, many people try to build communication skills without first addressing self-worth. They learn techniques, they memorize phrases, they study persuasion, they practice public speaking. These things can help, but if deep down they still believe they are unworthy, their communication will always carry tension. The words may sound polished, but the energy beneath them will still be asking, "Am I enough? Do I deserve to be here? Will they reject me if I speak honestly?" Technique without inner belief has limits. That is why self-worth is not separate from communication. It is the emotional ground underneath it. The way you see yourself influences the way you present yourself. If you see yourself as valuable, your communication carries greater clarity. If you see yourself as a problem, your communication carries apology. If you see yourself as powerless, your communication carries fear. If you see yourself as someone whose thoughts matter, your communication carries presence. What you believe about yourself teaches others how to respond to you. That is not because the world is perfect or fair. It is because people constantly read signals: tone, posture, eye contact, timing, firmness, hesitation, and consistency all send messages. When self-worth is present, your words and your energy begin to match. You no longer ask for respect while acting like you expect disrespect. You no longer say you deserve more while communicating from deep insecurity. There is congruence, there is alignment, and people feel it. This is also why self-worth affects relationships so deeply. Many relationship problems begin long before a conflict appears. They begin in what a person believes they deserve. Someone with low self-worth may cling to people who drain them because being chosen feels more important than being treated well. They may fear loneliness so much that they accept dishonor. They may avoid honest conversations because they think tension means abandonment. Or they may become overly defensive, not because they are strong, but because every disagreement touches an old wound of not feeling enough. On the other hand, a person with healthier self-worth can love deeply without disappearing. They can care without begging. They can communicate needs without shame. They can forgive without having no standards. They can walk away from what dishonors them, not because they are cold, but because they finally understand that love without respect becomes suffering. This truth reaches into work as well. How many people remain underpaid because they think asking for more is selfish? How many stay in environments that diminish them because they think they should just be thankful to have anything? How many never pitch their idea, start their business, apply for the bigger role, or step into leadership because they do not believe their contribution deserves that level of visibility? Low self-worth makes people hide their value even from themselves, and the world rarely rewards value that a person is unwilling to acknowledge. So how does someone begin rebuilding self-worth? It starts with awareness. You must notice the beliefs that have been running your life. Notice the phrases you repeat inside your mind. Notice where you assume rejection, where you minimize yourself, where you tolerate too much, where you stay silent, where you keep trying to earn what should not need to be earned. Notice where your communication changes because fear of disapproval has become stronger than loyalty to truth. Awareness is powerful because what remains unseen remains in control. Then comes the harder work, questioning the old story. Who taught you that your value depends on perfection? Who taught you that being loved means overgiving? Who taught you that speaking up is dangerous? Who taught you that success belongs to other people and not to you? Who taught you that one failure gets to define the rest of your life? Some of those lessons came from wounded people. Some came from painful experiences. Some came from environments that were never healthy enough to show you your true worth. But just because a belief was formed early does not mean it must rule forever. You are allowed to outgrow the lies that once kept you safe. You are allowed to build a new identity. That new identity is not fake confidence. It is not arrogance. It is not pretending to be superior. Real self-worth is humble and strong at the same time. It does not need to dominate. It does not need to prove. It simply stands on truth. It says, I am still learning, still growing, still imperfect, but I will not treat myself as if I am worthless. I will not keep negotiating my life from a place of inner poverty. And once that shift begins, your communication changes naturally. You start saying what you mean with more peace. You begin asking for what you need without so much guilt. You stop dressing your truth in endless apology. You start listening without so much internal panic. You become more grounded in conflict, more composed in pressure, more willing to let the wrong things leave your life, more willing to pursue the right things with courage. Because when self-worth rises, your words stop coming from desperation and start coming from alignment. You no longer speak just to be accepted. You speak to be true. You no longer chase every room. You learn to bring value into the rooms that deserve your presence. You no longer build your life around fear of rejection. You build it around respect for who you are becoming. So let this chapter settle into your spirit. The way you communicate with the world is deeply connected to the way you value yourself. If your confidence has been weak, if your voice has been hesitant, if your boundaries have been unclear, do not rush to condemn yourself. Go deeper. Ask what belief has been living underneath those patterns. Ask what old wound has been writing your language. Ask what version of you has been trying to survive by staying small. Then begin the work of changing that story. Not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. Because your voice deserves to carry more strength than your fear. Your presence deserves to carry more dignity than your old shame. Your future deserves to be shaped by truth, not by the broken beliefs of your past. And the moment you begin to truly understand your worth, something powerful happens. You stop communicating like someone asking for permission to exist. You begin communicating like someone who knows they were created with value, with purpose, and with a right to stand fully in their own life. That is the psychology of self-worth. It is the invisible force that shapes confidence, sharpens communication, and changes destiny from the inside out. Chapter 3. The Courage to Face Rejection. There is a quiet fear that controls more lives than most people realize. It does not always look dramatic. It does not always announce itself loudly. Often, it hides behind hesitation. It disguises itself as overthinking, delay, perfectionism, silence, or the excuse that now is not the right time. But beneath all of that, there is usually something deeper, something more human, something more painful. It is the fear of rejection. This fear has stopped countless people from asking for the raise they deserved, applying for the role they were capable of, speaking their truth in relationships, setting clear boundaries, pitching their ideas, starting their business, making the call, sending the message, offering the proposal, or taking the chance that could have changed their life. Not because they lacked talent, not because they lacked vision, not because the opportunity was impossible, but because somewhere inside, the possibility of hearing no felt heavier than the hope of hearing yes. And that is the tragedy of rejection when it is left unchallenged. It does not only hurt people when it happens, it hurts them long before it happens by convincing them not to try at all. That is why courage matters so much. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is not the personality trait of people who never feel nervous. It is not a gift reserved for the boldest voices in the room. Real courage is something quieter and more powerful than that. It is the decision to move forward even when fear is present. It is the willingness to ask, to speak, to try, to stretch, to risk discomfort in the service of growth. Courage is what allows a person to say, I may not control the answer, but I will no longer let fear control the question. That decision can transform a life. Most people do not realize how many invisible walls rejection has built inside them. Some of those walls were formed years ago. A child raises a hand and gets laughed at. A teenager expresses interest and gets embarrassed. A young adult applies, hopes, reaches out and gets ignored. Someone opens their heart and gets hurt. Someone shares an idea and is dismissed. Someone hears criticism before they ever hear belief. Moment by moment, disappointment by disappointment, the mind begins to form a painful conclusion. It is safer not to ask. It is safer not to be seen. It is safer not to risk being told, I am not enough. And once that belief settles in, people start shrinking without even noticing it. They stop making bold requests. They stop offering big ideas. They stop asking for help. They stop clarifying what they need. They begin to live beneath their own potential, not because life has closed every door, but because they stopped knocking. This is how fear becomes a prison. The walls are not always visible, but the limits are real. People tell themselves stories that sound reasonable on the surface. I don't want to bother them. I should wait until I'm more ready. Maybe someone else deserves it more. I don't want to seem difficult. I don't want to come across as too ambitious. I don't want to look foolish. But beneath all of those thoughts is the same emotional force. I am trying to avoid rejection. The problem is that a life built around avoiding rejection becomes a life built around avoiding expansion. Because growth almost always requires exposure. It requires the possibility of being misunderstood, overlooked, denied, corrected, or even turned away. The person who wants to increase income must be willing to ask for more. The person who wants healthier relationships must be willing to speak honestly. The person who wants new opportunities must be willing to put themselves in situations where approval is not guaranteed. The person who wants a bigger life must accept that bigger living comes with bigger emotional risks. There is no courageous future without uncomfortable moments. And yet rejection is not the enemy people believe it to be. Yes, it can sting. Yes, it can wound the ego. Yes, it can awaken old insecurities. But rejection is not always destruction. Sometimes it is direction, sometimes it is protection, sometimes it is clarification, sometimes it is a necessary part of the process that separates those who only wish from those who truly pursue. The pain is real, but the meaning is not fixed. What breaks one person can build another, depending on the story they attach to the experience. One person hears no and thinks, I should never have tried. Another hears no and thinks, good, now I know where I stand, now I can adjust. Now I can improve, now I can move toward the next door. Same word, different interpretation, different future. That is why the battle is not just with rejection itself, the battle is with what rejection means to you. If rejection means I am worthless, you will fear it with all your heart. If rejection means I am behind, you will avoid it whenever possible. If rejection means I should be ashamed, you will protect yourself by staying small. But if rejection begins to mean I am participating, I am learning, I am stretching, I am alive enough to risk something meaningful, then its power over you begins to weaken. This shift is everything. Imagine a person who wants a better role at work but has convinced themselves to stay quiet for years. They do the work, they add value, they show up, but they never speak up about their goals, never ask for feedback, never request growth, never communicate their ambition. Why? Not because they do not care, because they are afraid that expressing desire will expose them to refusal. So instead of risking one uncomfortable conversation, they accept months or years of quiet frustration. They choose the pain of underliving over the pain of possible rejection. This happens everywhere. A person stays in a draining relationship because asking for change might lead to conflict. A creator never shares their work because the internet might criticize it. A future entrepreneur never starts because the market might say no. A student never reaches out to a mentor because the message might be ignored. A salesperson avoids making the call. A leader avoids hard conversations. A dreamer avoids the first step. The deeper issue is not lack of ability, it is emotional avoidance. And emotional avoidance is expensive. It costs opportunities, it costs confidence, it costs momentum, it costs self-respect. Because every time you betray your own voice to avoid discomfort, something inside you notices. Every time you silence your own desire because fear is louder than courage, you teach yourself that fear gets to lead. Every time you do not ask because you cannot tolerate the possibility of no, you surrender power before life even responds. That is why the courage to face rejection is about much more than hearing yes. It is about reclaiming your agency. It is about becoming someone who no longer waits for perfect certainty before acting. It is about becoming someone who understands that your responsibility is not to control outcomes. Your responsibility is to honor the effort, the honesty, and the courage required to pursue them. This mindset frees you because once you stop measuring your worth by the answer, you become brave enough to ask the question. And often, people are surprised by how much of life changes when they start asking. They ask for feedback and discover what to improve. They ask for the opportunity and find out the door was more open than they assumed. They ask for support and realize people were willing to help. They ask for clarity and remove confusion that had been draining them for months. They ask for respect and expose who truly values them. They ask for the sale, the meeting, the introduction, the chance, the next step. Not every request works out, but enough of them do to prove that fear had been lying, because fear almost always exaggerates rejection before it happens. Fear tells you the no will destroy you. Fear tells you embarrassment will last forever. Fear tells you people are judging you more than they are. Fear tells you silence is safer. Fear tells you to wait until you feel ready. But courage teaches a different lesson. Courage teaches that most pain is survivable, that awkwardness fades, that growth often begins on the other side of tension. That readiness is often created through action, not before it. That the person you are becoming needs evidence that you can face discomfort and remain standing. That evidence matters. Every time you do something brave, even something small, you build trust with yourself. You send a message inward. I can handle this. I can survive disappointment. I can keep moving after no. I do not need guaranteed approval to act with conviction. That is how courage grows. Not in giant leaps all at once, but in repeated moments of choosing action over avoidance. A message sent. A request made. A boundary stated. A proposal offered. A conversation started. A truth spoken. A dream pursued before certainty arrives. This is how a timid life becomes a stronger one. Now, it is important to understand that courage does not make rejection painless. It makes rejection purposeful. The goal is not to become emotionless. The goal is to stop letting emotion decide your destiny. Yes, you may feel disappointed. Yes, you may need time to recover, but you no longer collapse into the old belief that rejection is proof you should stay small. Instead, you begin asking better questions. What can this teach me? Was this misalignment or poor timing? Do I need to improve my skill, my clarity, my delivery, or my patience? Is this no permanent, or is it simply not now? Did this rejection reveal that I was chasing something beneath my true worth? These questions turn pain into progress. And sometimes rejection does something even more valuable. It reveals who you are when things do not go your way. Do you shut down? Do you attack? Do you retreat into bitterness? Or do you breathe, regroup, reflect, and return wiser? Your response to rejection says a great deal about your emotional maturity. Anyone can feel confident when things are working, but real strength appears when effort is met with resistance. That is where identity is tested. That is where character is shaped. That is where resilience becomes real. Many of the strongest people in the world are not strong because life was easy for them. They are strong because they stopped making rejection mean the end. They learned how to metabolize disappointment without turning it into self-destruction. They learned how to keep asking, keep refining, keep showing up. Over time, what once terrified them became a normal part of movement. Not because they stopped caring, but because they stopped worshipping comfort. That is a powerful transformation. There is also something deeply liberating about understanding this. Rejection is not always about you. Sometimes people say no because of timing, budget, priorities, pressure, assumptions, their own fears, their own blindness, or circumstances you cannot see. Sometimes a closed door is not a verdict on your worth. It is simply a reflection of conditions that are not aligned. But when you make every no personal, you carry unnecessary pain. When you remember that not every answer is a judgment, you stay lighter, clearer, and more capable of trying again. And trying again is where so many breakthroughs live. One request may be denied, but the next one may be welcomed. One idea may be ignored, but the next version may connect. One person may fail to see your value, but another may recognize it immediately. One season may say no, while the next season says now. But none of that happens if fear convinces you to stop after the first discomfort. This is why you must learn to separate rejection from identity. You got rejected. That does not mean you are rejectable. You heard no. That does not mean life is closing forever. You are overlooked. That does not mean you are invisible. You are denied. That does not mean you are done. One answer can inform you, but it should never define you. The people who grow the most in life are often not the people who hear yes the most. They are the people who let no mature them rather than paralyze them. They understand that every meaningful pursuit includes moments of uncertainty. They stop treating rejection as a monster and start treating it as a teacher. They feel the discomfort, but they keep moving. They let the experience sharpen their communication, deepen their humility, strengthen their endurance, and clarify their direction. That is how fear loses its grip. Not by being argued with endlessly, by being outlived through brave action. So if you have been holding back, hear this clearly. The thing you are afraid to ask for may not be guaranteed. The person may say no. The opportunity may not open. The answer may disappoint you. But living with a permanently silenced voice is its own kind of heartbreak. Staying hidden has a cost. Never asking has a cost. Never trying has a cost. And over time, the cost of avoidance becomes heavier than the cost of rejection. Because rejection hurts for a moment. But regret can hurt for years. You do not need permission to become braver. You do not need total confidence before you begin. You do not need perfect words. You do not need a guarantee. You need willingness. You need honesty. You need the decision that your future is worth more than your fear. So ask, speak, apply, offer, negotiate, reach out, set the boundary, start the conversation, take the chance that your smaller self has been avoiding. Not because success is certain, but because courage is necessary. And every time you act with courage, you become a little more free. Free from the tyranny of other people's responses. Free from the prison of imagined embarrassment. Free from the old story that said your value depended on hearing yes. This chapter is not about becoming reckless. It is about becoming available to a larger life. It is about breaking the mental barriers that have kept you waiting on the edge of your own potential. It is about remembering that rejection is not proof that you should stop. Often, it is proof that you finally had the courage to begin, and that matters. Because the people who create extraordinary lives are not the people who avoid every no. They are the people who become strong enough to hear no without abandoning themselves. So step forward. Let your voice shake if it must, but let it be heard. Let your heart race if it must, but let it move. Let fear come along for the ride if it must, but do not hand it the steering wheel. You were not created to live a life designed by avoidance. You were created to grow, to ask, to risk, to rise, and to discover that your courage is far greater than your fear. And often, the life you want begins the moment you become brave enough to face the possibility of rejection and ask for more anyway. Chapter 4. Speaking so you are heard. There is a deep frustration that many people carry quietly through life. It is the feeling of having something important inside you, yet struggling to express it in a way that truly lands. It is the pain of needing understanding, but feeling misunderstood. It is the exhaustion of repeating yourself and still not feeling seen. It is the silent burden of carrying expectations, disappointments, and emotions that never get clearly spoken until they turn into resentment. So many people are not suffering because they have nothing to say. They are suffering because they do not know how to say it in a way that creates clarity, respect, and change. That is why learning to speak so you are heard is not a minor skill. It is a life skill. It is a relationship skill. It is a peace-protecting skill. It shapes your work, your family, your friendships, your confidence, your opportunities, and your emotional health. Because when people cannot express their needs, expectations, and boundaries clearly, they often end up living lives that feel crowded by confusion, disappointment, and internal pressure. And that pain grows slowly. At first, it looks small. A person says yes when they mean no because they do not want to seem rude. Someone avoids asking for help because they do not want to look weak. A friend stays quiet about something that hurt them because they fear conflict. An employee assumes their hard work should be obvious and never communicates what support or recognition they need. A partner hopes the other person will somehow just understand what is expected without ever having an honest conversation. Everything is left vague. Everything is implied. Everything is felt, but not fully spoken. Then, over time, the cost appears. Resentment grows where clarity was missing. Exhaustion grows where boundaries were weak. Distance grows where honesty was avoided. Disappointment grows where expectations were never clearly discussed. This is one of the great ironies of life. Many people avoid clear communication because they want peace. But the absence of clear communication often destroys peace. What feels uncomfortable in the moment becomes painful in the long run. A 5-minute honest conversation that could have created understanding is delayed for weeks, months, or even years. And in that silence, tension begins to build. That is why speaking clearly is an act of self-respect and relational maturity. It is not about being harsh. It is not about becoming argumentative. It is not about dominating conversations or making every situation heavy. It is about learning how to say what is true in a way that is grounded, respectful, and effective. It is about expressing your inner world without apology for its existence. It is about understanding that if something matters deeply enough to affect your peace, then it matters enough to be communicated with care. Many people never learned this. They learned how to stay quiet. They learned how to keep the atmosphere comfortable, even if it meant making themselves uncomfortable. They learned how to minimize their needs so others would not be inconvenienced. They learned how to smile while carrying disappointment. They learned how to hope others would read their mind rather than risk speaking plainly. And because of that, they grew older without growing clearer. But life becomes much heavier when your truth is always trapped behind fear. When you do not say what you need, people make assumptions. When you do not state your expectations, people fill in the blanks. When you do not draw your boundaries, others often cross lines they were never told existed. Then you suffer, not only because others failed to understand you, but because you never gave understanding a real chance. This does not mean people are never inconsiderate. It does not mean everyone would respond perfectly if you spoke up. Some people will still misunderstand, some will resist, some will not like your honesty. But clear expression gives dignity to your voice. It gives structure to your relationships. It gives truth a place to stand. And without that, too much of life becomes guesswork. To speak so you are heard, you must first understand something important. Clarity is kindness. Many people think kindness means softness without structure. They think being kind means always being agreeable, endlessly flexible, and careful not to disappoint anyone. But true kindness is more mature than that. Kindness includes honesty. Kindness includes clarity. Kindness includes saying what needs to be said before pain multiplies in silence. A vague life is not always a peaceful life. Sometimes it is simply a delayed conflict. A person who clearly says, "I need more notice before plans are made," is being kind. A leader who says, "Here is what I expect, and here is what success looks like," is being kind. A partner who says, "When this happens, I feel disconnected, and I need us to talk about it," is being kind. A professional who says, "I'm committed to this work, and I'd like to discuss the value I'm contributing," is being kind to themselves and respectful to the process. Clarity prevents confusion from becoming injury. And yet clarity requires courage. Because the moment you begin speaking more directly, you risk something. You risk being misunderstood. You risk not being liked by everyone. You risk hearing resistance. You risk discovering whether people truly respect your voice or only preferred your silence. That is why so many people remain unclear. Confusion feels safer than confrontation. Vagueness feels easier than vulnerability. But the life built on avoiding discomfort becomes a life where your needs are constantly negotiated downward. That is too high a price to pay. The truth is, people cannot consistently honor what you are unwilling to communicate. They cannot respond to needs you hide. They cannot respect boundaries you never define. They cannot meet expectations that exist only in your mind. This is why speaking clearly is not selfish. It is responsible. It is mature. It is how healthy relationships are built and how healthy lives are protected. Of course, the way you speak matters. Clarity is not cruelty. Honesty is not aggression. Firmness is not disrespect. There is a difference between expressing a truth and throwing a wound. There is a difference between being direct and being destructive. The goal is not to explode after months of silence. The goal is to communicate earlier, calmer, and more intentionally so truth does not have to come out through accumulated pain. That begins with ownership. Instead of speaking only through blame, strong communication often begins with grounded self-expression. Not, "You never care," but, "I feel overlooked when this keeps happening, and I need us to address it." Not, "You always disrespect my time," but, "I need more reliability around timing because this affects my schedule and energy." Not, "Nobody supports me," but, "I'm carrying too much alone and I need more support than I've been asking for." This kind of language changes everything. It keeps the focus on what is real without turning the conversation into unnecessary warfare. It gives the other person something they can actually understand and respond to. It protects your message from being lost inside accusation. And most importantly, it helps you stay rooted in truth instead of getting swept away by emotion. Because when people feel unheard for too long, they often stop speaking clearly and start speaking emotionally. That is understandable, but it is not always effective. Years of swallowed truth can come out all at once, and when that happens, the real need can get buried beneath the intensity of the reaction. This is why emotional awareness matters so much. Before a difficult conversation, you must know what you actually need to say. What is the issue? What do you need? What expectation needs to be clarified? What boundary has been crossed? What outcome are you hoping for? Without this inner clarity, outer communication becomes messy. Many conversations fail not because the truth is unimportant, but because the truth was never organized before it was expressed. Speaking so you are heard requires that you slow down enough to understand your own message before delivering it. It requires that you move beyond raw frustration and into meaningful expression. It requires that you separate what you feel from what you want to communicate so that emotion can inform your truth without hijacking it. And then there are boundaries. Boundaries are one of the clearest signs of self-respect. They are not punishments. They are not walls built to keep everyone out. Healthy boundaries are simply honest statements about what you can accept, what you cannot, what you are available for, and what you are no longer willing to carry. They are the language of personal responsibility and emotional maturity. A person without boundaries is often slowly consumed by other people's expectations. They say yes out of guilt. They stay accessible out of fear. They overgive out of insecurity. They tolerate too much because they want to be perceived as good, loyal, generous, or easygoing. But eventually, even the kindest heart can grow tired when it is constantly overextended, and exhaustion has a way of exposing what honesty should have addressed much earlier. This is why boundaries must be spoken, not merely wished for. You cannot keep hoping people will magically notice your limits. You cannot keep waiting for others to guess where your line is. You cannot call it love when you are silently abandoning yourself to keep everyone else comfortable. At some point, maturity requires language. It requires saying, "I can't commit to that right now." It requires saying, "I'm not available for being spoken to that way." It requires saying, "I need time to think before I answer." It requires saying, "I'm willing to help, but I'm not able to carry all of this." It requires saying, "This matters to me, and I don't want to leave it unspoken." There is power in simple, calm truth. Not dramatic truth, not emotionally explosive truth, just clear, steady truth. And often, the more simply you speak, the more powerfully you are understood. People who struggle to be heard sometimes believe they need more words, more explanation, more justification. But often the opposite is true. When you know what matters, you can say it with more simplicity. You do not have to defend your humanity with a speech every time you set a healthy limit. You do not have to write an essay every time you express a need. You do not have to make your boundary sound painless in order for it to be valid. Sometimes the clearest sentence is the strongest one. "I'm not comfortable with that. That doesn't work for me. I need us to be clear about expectations. I'm willing to continue, but not under those conditions. I want to support this, and I also need support." These are not aggressive statements. They are grounded statements. They communicate value without begging for permission. That is another important truth. People hear you differently when you speak from grounded conviction. If your words are wrapped in apology, fear, or constant retreat, your message becomes easier to dismiss. But when your energy says, "I respect myself enough to speak honestly," your voice begins to carry a different weight. Not because you are louder, but because you are more aligned. Your words and your self-respect begin to move together. This matters deeply in professional life. At work, unclear communication creates missed expectations, weak leadership, poor teamwork, and hidden resentment. The employee who never asks questions may make preventable mistakes. The leader who never clarifies priorities creates confusion for everyone. The team member who never expresses overload quietly moves toward burnout. The professional who never advocates for their value may remain stuck, while less capable but more articulate people move forward. Communication is not separate from success. It is part of success. You may work hard, but if you cannot express priorities, ask for clarity, discuss value, or state concerns constructively, your effort will often carry unnecessary friction. The world does not only respond to contribution, it responds to communication around contribution. This is not vanity, it is function. If people do not understand what matters, what is needed, or where the limits are, avoidable problems multiply. The same is true in personal relationships. Love does not remove the need for communication. In fact, closeness increases the need for it. The closer people are, the easier it becomes to make assumptions. They should know. If they cared, they would already understand. I shouldn't have to say it. These thoughts are common, but they are dangerous. Even loving people are not mind readers. Care without clarity often leads to confusion. Love grows stronger, not through silent expectation, but through honest expression. Some of the strongest relationships are not the ones without difficult conversations. They are the ones where difficult conversations are handled with respect, truth, and willingness to understand. In those relationships, people do not weaponize silence. They do not make guessing a test of loyalty. They do not let hurt sit unspoken until it becomes poison. They speak, they listen, they clarify, they repair. That is what mature love does. And listening matters just as much as speaking. To be heard, you must also learn how to hear. Because communication is not only about delivering your message, it is also about creating a space where understanding can actually happen. Sometimes people are not heard because they are speaking to release pressure rather than to build connection. They say their piece, but they do not stay open enough to listen, adjust, and engage. Strong communication is not a monologue. It is a disciplined exchange. It says, "This is what I need to express, and I am also willing to understand what is happening on your side." That balance is powerful. It protects your truth without making truth a weapon. It gives the conversation movement. It creates the possibility of resolution, not just release. And still, there will be moments when you speak clearly and are not received well. This is part of life. Not everyone will appreciate your honesty. Not everyone will celebrate your boundaries. Not everyone will respond maturely to clear expectations. Some people benefited from your silence. Some were comfortable with your overextension. Some preferred the version of you that was easier to manage, easier to guilt, easier to overlook. When you begin speaking differently, some relationships will reveal their true condition. Do not fear that revelation. It is better to be informed by truth than trapped by illusion. If someone can only love you when you are unclear, constantly available, endlessly accommodating, or afraid to say what you need, then the problem was never your clarity. The problem was the kind of connection being sustained. Healthy people may not always agree with everything you say, but they can engage with honesty. They can respect communication even when it is uncomfortable. They do not require your self-erasure to feel secure. So if you want a stronger life, a clearer life, a more peaceful life, then practice this. Say things sooner. Say them simpler. Say them with ownership. Say them with respect. Say them before resentment takes over. Say them before your silence becomes your suffering. Tell people what matters. Tell people what you need. Tell people what you expect. Tell people where your limits are. Tell the truth while it is still calm enough to guide the conversation instead of exploding through accumulated pain. This is how trust is built. This is how peace is protected. This is how respect grows. This is how confusion loses its power. And this is how you begin to live with greater dignity. Because your life changes when your voice becomes clearer. You stop waiting for perfect timing. You stop assuming other people will guess. You stop carrying disappointment that could have been addressed earlier. You stop making silence your strategy. You begin to participate more consciously in your own life. You learn that being heard is not only about volume, it is about clarity. It is about truth. It is about emotional steadiness. It is about saying what matters in a way that invites understanding without betraying your self-respect. So let this become part of who you are. Not someone who waits until breaking point. Not someone who buries every need under politeness. Not someone who hopes life will become clear without ever speaking clearly. Become someone who can express truth with calm courage. Become someone who can state boundaries without shame. Become someone who can define expectations before disappointment grows. Become someone who understands that voice is not just sound, it is agency, it is presence, it is self-respect made audible. Because when you learn to speak so you are heard, you do more than improve conversations. You improve relationships, you improve opportunities, you improve peace, you improve the structure of your daily life. And perhaps most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself in the moments when your voice is needed most. That is real growth. That is real strength. That is what it means to speak with clarity, live with dignity, and create a life where your truth no longer stays trapped inside you, but becomes a force that shapes your world for the better. Chapter 5. The Emotional Advantage. There is a kind of strength that many people overlook because it does not always arrive with noise. It does not need to dominate a room. It does not need to interrupt, impress, or overpower. Yet again and again, this quiet strength becomes the difference between broken trust and lasting connection, between conflict and clarity, between pressure and poise, between a missed opportunity and a meaningful result. That strength is emotional intelligence. Many people grow up thinking success belongs to the loudest voice, the toughest personality, the most aggressive negotiator, or the person who always seems to be in control. But life teaches a deeper lesson. In the moments that matter most, people do not only respond to logic, they respond to energy, they respond to tone, they respond to whether they feel respected, understood, safe, and seen. They respond to how you make them feel while you are trying to make your point. That is why the emotional advantage matters so much. It is the ability to understand emotions without being ruled by them. It is the ability to read the room without losing yourself in it. It is the ability to stay grounded under pressure, to listen beneath words, to recognize fear behind anger, hesitation behind silence, insecurity behind defensiveness, and hope behind resistance. Emotional intelligence allows you to see that every conversation is happening on more than one level. There are the words people speak, and there are the feelings they carry while speaking them. There is the issue on the surface, and there is the emotional reality beneath it. When you learn to recognize both, you begin to communicate differently. And when you communicate differently, outcomes begin to change. Think about how often trust is built or broken, not by what was said, but by how it was said. A person may have the right message and still lose the moment because their tone feels cold, careless, or dismissive. Another person may need to deliver hard truth, yet people receive it because they feel the respect in the delivery. One manager may give feedback and leave someone discouraged and closed off. Another may give equally direct feedback and leave that same person motivated, clear, and committed to improving. The information may be similar. The emotional experience is not. This is why emotional intelligence is not a soft extra. It is practical power. It helps you build trust faster because people sense when you are present. It helps you lead better because people are more willing to follow someone who understands more than tasks. It helps you negotiate more effectively because you learn that people do not make decisions from logic alone. It helps you protect relationships because you stop reacting only to behavior and start understanding what may be driving it. It helps you protect yourself because you become less likely to let temporary emotions sabotage lasting goals. At the heart of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Before you can understand others, you must begin to understand yourself. You must learn to notice what happens inside you when pressure rises, what triggers you, what makes you shut down, what makes you defensive, what makes you rush to prove yourself. What kind of tone enters your voice when you feel disrespected, ignored, or misunderstood? What old wounds become active in difficult conversations? What fear shows up when you hear criticism, delay, or disagreement? Many people think they are reacting to the present moment, when in truth they are reacting to old pain that the present moment awakened. That is why self-awareness is so important. Without it, emotions run the conversation from behind the curtain. A person hears one challenging comment and suddenly feels 10 years younger inside. They respond not from maturity, but from an old place of hurt. Someone feels overlooked and begins speaking sharply, not because the issue required sharpness, but because unresolved insecurity was already waiting beneath the surface. Another person feels anxious and starts over-explaining, apologizing, or retreating. The issue may look external, but the outcome is being shaped by an internal storm. Emotional intelligence begins when you learn to pause and ask, what am I feeling right now? What is this moment stirring in me? What part of my reaction belongs to the present, and what part belongs to my history? That pause is powerful. It creates space between feeling and action. It keeps emotion from becoming impulse. It allows wisdom to catch up with intensity. And in that space, you begin to gain one of life's greatest advantages, the ability to respond instead of merely react. There is a massive difference between those two things. A reaction is immediate, unfiltered, often driven by fear, pride, stress, or pain. A response carries awareness. A response may still be firm, still be emotional, still be honest, but it is guided by intention. And intention changes everything. The person who reacts may damage trust in seconds. The person who responds may build trust in the very same moment. This matters especially in conflict. Conflict is one of the clearest tests of emotional intelligence because conflict exposes what is happening beneath the surface. It reveals whether a person needs to win or whether they are willing to understand. It reveals whether they can stay steady when discomfort rises. It reveals whether their ego controls their listening. It reveals whether they can separate the problem from the person. Most people do not lose trust only because conflict happened. They lose trust because of how conflict was handled. When people feel attacked, dismissed, mocked, interrupted, or emotionally unsafe, they stop bringing their best self into the conversation. They become guarded. They defend instead of engage. They hide instead of share. They stop trusting not only your words, but your presence. And once trust weakens, even simple communication becomes harder. But when conflict is handled with emotional intelligence, something different happens. People may still disagree, but they do not have to become enemies. Tension can become clarification, pain can become understanding, boundaries can become healthier, solutions become easier to find because the conversation is no longer being buried under unnecessary emotional damage. This does not mean emotional intelligence avoids difficult truth. It means it knows how to carry difficult truth in a way that leaves dignity in the room. That is a rare and powerful ability. It looks like listening fully before defending yourself. It looks like noticing when someone is overwhelmed and choosing the right timing. It looks like saying, "Help me understand what's behind that," instead of immediately assuming the worst. It looks like naming emotion without shaming it. It looks like staying calm enough to hear the message instead of getting trapped in the tone. It looks like speaking firmly without turning firm into cruel. It looks like understanding that when people feel respected, they are far more open to resolution. Trust is deeply emotional. People trust those who make them feel safe enough to be real. They trust those who can handle honesty without weaponizing it. They trust those who stay grounded under pressure. They trust those who do not make every conversation about ego. They trust those who can bring clarity without humiliation, strength without arrogance, and presence without performance. And trust changes outcomes. In business, trust makes negotiations smoother, teams stronger, leadership more effective, and partnerships more durable. In families, trust creates emotional safety. In friendships, trust allows honesty to deepen the bond. In romantic relationships, trust becomes the atmosphere where love can breathe. In personal growth, trust in yourself becomes the foundation of courage. This is why emotional intelligence is not only about understanding others, it is also about managing yourself in a way that keeps trust alive. Sometimes the emotional advantage means knowing how to regulate your own fear so it does not speak too loudly. Sometimes it means not sending the message while angry. Sometimes it means taking a breath before answering a provocative comment. Sometimes it means noticing that you are tired, overloaded, or already tense, and refusing to have a major conversation from that state. Sometimes it means recognizing that your pride wants to defend, but wisdom wants to listen first. Self-regulation may not look dramatic, but it protects more opportunities than people realize. A career can be damaged by one unnecessary outburst. A relationship can be weakened by one pattern of careless reactions. A negotiation can collapse because someone needed to be right more than they needed to be wise. On the other hand, a door can open because someone remained composed when others expected them to lose control. Respect can grow because someone handled pressure with grace. A problem can be solved because one person chose curiosity over escalation. This is the emotional advantage at work. It turns emotional steadiness into strategic strength. Another part of emotional intelligence is empathy. Empathy is not weakness. It is not agreement. It is not becoming passive or allowing poor behavior. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's emotional reality without losing sight of your own. It is the willingness to see more than your own point of view. It is the discipline of asking, what might this feel like from their side? What fear, pressure, pain, or need might be shaping their behavior? When empathy enters a conversation, the entire tone can change. Suddenly, the other person is not just difficult, they may be afraid. They are not just resistant, they may feel unheard. They are not just angry, they may be carrying disappointment, shame, or stress. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it gives you more accurate information, and accurate information helps you respond more wisely. For example, a customer speaking sharply may not simply want to create trouble. They may feel ignored after repeated frustration. An employee missing deadlines may not be lazy, they may be overwhelmed and ashamed to admit it. A partner becoming quiet may not be uncaring, they may be hurt and unsure how to express it. A colleague who seems defensive may be afraid of looking incompetent. When you understand the emotional layer, you stop fighting only the visible behavior and begin addressing what is actually driving it. That creates stronger outcomes. Because people soften when they feel understood. They open when they feel safe. They listen more when they feel respected. They cooperate more when they sense that the conversation is not designed to crush them. This is why emotionally intelligent people often achieve more without using force. They know how to create emotional conditions where progress becomes possible. And yet empathy must be balanced with boundaries. This is important. Some people hear words like empathy and emotional intelligence and assume it means endlessly accommodating everyone's emotions. But real emotional intelligence includes self-respect. It includes the wisdom to understand others without abandoning yourself. It includes the strength to remain compassionate while still saying no. It includes the ability to see someone's pain without allowing that pain to control your choices or excuse repeated harm. The emotional advantage is not becoming emotionally absorbed by everyone around you. It is becoming emotionally clear. It is knowing what is yours to carry and what is not. It is knowing how to care without collapsing. It is knowing how to understand without surrendering your standards. It is knowing that trust is built not only by kindness, but by consistency, honesty, and healthy boundaries. Emotionally intelligent people are not always the most agreeable people. Often, they are simply the most aware. They know when softness is needed and when firmness is necessary. They know when someone needs patience and when a boundary must be stated. They know when silence is wisdom and when silence becomes avoidance. They know when to push, when to pause, when to ask, and when to walk away. That kind of awareness creates extraordinary strength. It also creates influence. People are drawn to those who make them feel understood. They remember those who stay composed in hard moments. They trust those who can hold truth and compassion at the same time. They respect those who do not panic under pressure. Influence is not only built through knowledge, titles, or skill. It is often built through emotional presence. The leader who listens deeply has influence. The negotiator who reads emotional dynamics has influence. The parent who remains calm in chaos has influence. The friend who brings honesty without judgment has influence. The partner who can say hard things with care has influence. Emotional intelligence turns presence into persuasion. Not manipulation, not performance. Persuasion through trust. That is why some people walk into a room and immediately create calm. Others create tension. Some make people feel valued. Others make people feel managed. Some bring clarity to difficulty. Others multiply the difficulty through emotional carelessness. The emotional energy you carry affects more than you think. And this is where the chapter becomes personal, because the emotional advantage is available to you. You do not have to be naturally calm in every moment. You do not need a perfect personality. You do not need to get every conversation right. Emotional intelligence is not perfection. It is practice. It is the daily work of noticing more, pausing more, listening more, understanding more, and reacting less blindly. It grows when you reflect after difficult moments instead of just moving on. It grows when you ask yourself, what did I feel? How did I handle it? What did I miss? What could I do better next time? It grows when you become honest about your triggers. It grows when you stop using emotion as an excuse and start treating it as information. It grows when you realize that strength without emotional wisdom often creates damage, while emotional wisdom adds depth to every other skill you have. A sharp mind becomes more effective with emotional control. A powerful voice becomes more trusted with empathy. A strong boundary becomes more respected with calm delivery. A bold vision becomes more persuasive when people feel safe following you. This is the hidden multiplier. Emotional intelligence does not replace confidence, communication, negotiation, or courage. It strengthens all of them. Without emotional intelligence, confidence can become arrogance, communication can become noise, negotiation can become force, courage can become recklessness. But when emotional intelligence is present, those same qualities become more refined, more trustworthy, and more effective. That is the emotional advantage. It allows you to move through life with more awareness, more grace, and more impact. It helps you build trust where others create distance. It helps you create understanding where others create confusion. It helps you protect relationships without sacrificing truth. It helps you reach better outcomes because people are far more willing to work with someone who knows how to handle both facts and feelings with maturity. So as you move forward, remember this. Every conversation carries emotional weight. Every interaction leaves an emotional impression. Every moment of pressure gives you a choice. You can let emotion lead without awareness, or you can develop the discipline to understand it, guide it, and use it wisely. Choose the second path. Become the person who can stay steady when the room gets tense. Become the person who can listen beneath the words. Become the person who can speak with truth and still leave dignity intact. Become the person who can recognize emotion without being controlled by it. Become the person who builds trust not only through what you know, but through how you show up. Because in the end, people may forget some of your words. They may forget certain details of the conversation, but they will remember how they felt in your presence. They will remember whether they felt respected, dismissed, understood, or judged. They will remember whether your strength brought safety or pressure. They will remember whether your honesty came with care, and those emotional memories shape the future of every relationship, every opportunity, and every outcome. That is why emotional intelligence is an advantage. Not just in rare moments, in everyday life, in leadership, in conflict, in trust, in growth, in love. And the more you develop it, the more powerfully you will discover that some of the greatest wins in life do not come from pushing harder, they come from understanding deeper. Chapter 6. Confidence is built before the conversation. There is a moment that almost everyone knows. It happens before the meeting begins, before the phone call connects, before the interview starts, before the negotiation opens, before the difficult truth is spoken, before the request is made, before the boundary is set, before the room turns quiet and all attention seems to wait for your voice. In that moment, the heart beats faster, the mind races, the body tightens, thoughts begin to scatter, questions arrive in rapid fire. What if I say the wrong thing? What if they disagree? What if I freeze? What if I forget my point? What if they reject me? What if I am not ready? This is the moment many people mistake for weakness, but it is not weakness. It is simply unprepared emotion meeting an important moment, and that is why confidence matters so much. Not the fake kind, not the loud kind, not the kind that performs certainty while hiding panic underneath. Real confidence, grounded confidence, steady confidence, the kind that does not need to pretend everything will go perfectly, but still knows how to enter the conversation with calm, clarity, and self-respect. That kind of confidence is rarely built in the moment itself. It is built before the conversation. This is one of the most important truths in communication, negotiation, leadership, and life. People often admire someone who looks calm under pressure and assume that calm is natural. They assume confidence is a personality trait, a gift, or a lucky advantage. They think some people are simply born ready for hard conversations, while others are doomed to feel nervous forever. But that is not the full story. More often than not, confidence is constructed. It is prepared. It is practiced. It is built in private, long before it is displayed in public. The person who speaks clearly in the meeting often thought deeply before entering the room. The person who negotiates calmly usually clarified their goals ahead of time. The person who handles an interview with grace did not only rely on hope, they organized their thoughts. They rehearsed key points. They thought through questions. They prepared their mind. They prepared their message. They prepared their energy. This is what many anxious people miss. They expect themselves to feel calm while leaving too much to chance. Then, when their thoughts become chaotic, they blame themselves. They say they are not confident. They say they are bad under pressure. They say they are not naturally good at speaking. But often, the real issue is not lack of potential. It is lack of preparation. Preparation is one of the most powerful antidotes to anxiety, not because it removes every uncomfortable feeling, but because it gives your mind something stronger than fear to stand on. Anxiety loves uncertainty. It feeds on vagueness. It grows when you enter important moments with no clear plan, no organized thoughts, no defined intention, and no emotional grounding. In that empty space, fear begins filling in the blanks. Fear creates worst-case scenarios. Fear magnifies risk. Fear turns unknowns into threats. Preparation interrupts that pattern. Preparation says, I know why I am here. Preparation says, I have thought about what matters. Preparation says, I know the key points I need to express. Preparation says, I have considered their perspective as well as my own. Preparation says, even if the conversation becomes difficult, I will not be meeting it empty-handed. That changes everything. Imagine two people entering the same important meeting. Both care deeply, both want a strong outcome, both feel some nervousness. But one of them spent time beforehand asking the right questions. What do I want from this conversation? What matters most? What is the strongest evidence I can bring? What concerns might the other person have? What am I willing to compromise on, and what is non-negotiable? What tone do I want to carry into the room? What do I need to remember if things become tense? The other person walks in with only hope and emotion. When the conversation begins, the difference becomes visible. One person may still feel nervous, but they are anchored. The other feels exposed. One can return to their preparation when pressure rises. The other becomes easier to shake. One is not depending only on mood. The other is at the mercy of the moment. This is why confidence is not magic. It is structure. It is what happens when clarity meets readiness. It is what happens when you respect an important conversation enough to prepare for it, before asking that moment to carry all the weight. Now, preparation does not mean scripting every sentence until you sound robotic. It does not mean trying to control every reaction or predict every outcome. Real preparation is more human than that. It is not about becoming rigid. It is about becoming ready. It is about reducing unnecessary uncertainty. It is about entering the conversation with enough clarity that anxiety no longer has unlimited room to take over. Because one of the biggest causes of anxiety is internal confusion. When you do not know exactly what you want to say, your mind tries to hold too much at once. Feelings, fears, possibilities, memories, and imagined outcomes all pile together. Then when the conversation starts, you feel pressure to sort all of it in real time. That is exhausting. That is why people ramble, forget important points, say less than they meant, say more than they intended, or walk away frustrated with themselves. Preparation helps you separate the noise from the message. It asks you to slow down before the moment, so you can become clear within yourself. What is the real issue? What do I need? What am I asking for? What matters most in this conversation? What does a good outcome look like? What emotional traps should I watch for? Those questions build inner order, and inner order creates outer calm. So many people want to appear confident without first doing the work that creates confidence. They want to feel brave while avoiding preparation. They want to sound clear while refusing to organize their thoughts. They want calm results from a chaotic inner process. But life rarely works that way. Calm is not something you wait for. Calm is something you build. You build it by thinking before speaking. You build it by preparing before performing. You build it by deciding that your future matters too much to leave important moments to panic and improvisation alone. There is also something deeply empowering about preparation, because it reminds you that confidence is not reserved for naturally bold people. It can be created by anyone willing to do the quiet work in advance. The quiet work matters. It is the work of reflection, the work of writing things down, the work of practicing out loud, the work of anticipating questions, the work of studying the context, the work of learning the numbers, facts or priorities that support your message, the work of being honest about your fears so they do not ambush you later, the work of rehearsing not just your words, but your mindset. This is where many strong outcomes begin. Before the room, before the call, before the ask, before the truth, before the pressure, long before other people see your confidence, you have already been building it in private. And this matters not only for professional conversations, but for personal ones too. Think about how many difficult emotional conversations go badly, not because the relationship had no hope, but because neither person prepared themselves before speaking. They entered with frustration, but no clarity. They brought emotion, but no structure. They knew they were hurt, but they had not taken time to understand what they actually needed to express. So the conversation became reactive. Old pain took over. Tone replaced truth. Defensiveness replaced connection. Both people left feeling even more misunderstood. Now imagine that same conversation with preparation. One person pauses beforehand and asks, "What am I really trying to communicate? What do I want the other person to understand? What part of this is pain, and what part is the request for change? How can I say this in a way that is honest without being destructive?" That preparation does not guarantee perfection, but it dramatically increases the chance of clarity, because prepared people do not only bring words, they bring intention, and intention creates emotional steadiness. Another reason preparation builds confidence is that it helps you separate what you can control from what you cannot. This is one of the great sources of peace in high-pressure moments. You cannot control whether someone agrees with you. You cannot control their mood, their ego, their fears, or their final answer. You cannot control every turn in the conversation, but you can control your readiness. You can control your tone. You can control your clarity. You can control how well you understand your own position. You can control how honestly and calmly you show up. That shift is liberating, because anxiety often grows when people feel responsible for the entire outcome. They think they must say everything perfectly, manage the other person's reactions, avoid all tension, and guarantee success. That is too much weight for any human being to carry. Preparation lightens that burden by returning you to what is actually yours. Your job is not to control everything. Your job is to prepare yourself well. Your job is to know your message. Your job is to stay as grounded as possible. Your job is to communicate with integrity. That is enough. And when you do that, something powerful happens. Even if the conversation becomes uncomfortable, you are less likely to lose yourself inside it. You know what you came to say. You know what matters. You know the heart of your message. So instead of being swept away by every emotional wave, you can return to your center. That is real control. Not control over people. Control over your presence. There is a huge difference. Many people think confidence means never feeling nervous. But some of the most confident people still feel nerves. Their hands may shake a little, their stomach may tighten, their heartbeat may rise. The difference is that they are not surprised by those sensations, and they are not defeated by them. Why? Because they have prepared enough to know that discomfort does not mean danger. It simply means the moment matters. Preparation teaches your body that pressure can be survived. It gives your nervous system evidence. I have thought this through. I know my main points. I have practiced this. I can handle questions. I do not need perfection to be effective. This evidence matters because confidence grows from proof, not just positive thinking. You cannot talk yourself into deep calm if your actions keep proving that you leave yourself unprepared. But when you prepare again and again, your mind begins to trust you. It begins to say, "We have done this work before. We know how to enter hard moments with more stability now." That trust is priceless. It turns preparation into self-respect, and self-respect turns into presence. This is why rituals before important conversations can be so powerful. Taking a few minutes to breathe deeply, reviewing your key points, reminding yourself of the purpose of the conversation, writing down what matters most, visualizing yourself speaking calmly, choosing one sentence you can return to if things become tense. These small acts may seem simple, but they communicate something important to your mind and body. I am not walking into this carelessly. I am showing up on purpose. Purpose calms panic. Purpose organizes emotion. Purpose creates steadiness. It is also important to prepare for the other side of the conversation, not just your own. Confidence grows when you consider what the other person may care about, fear, misunderstand, or resist. This does not mean becoming overly worried about pleasing them. It means becoming wiser. If you know their possible concerns, you can address them more effectively. If you know their priorities, you can frame your message with more relevance. If you know where tension might arise, you can prepare your response before emotions are high. Preparation creates perspective, and perspective reduces fear, because fear often comes from feeling blindsided. But when you have already thought through several possibilities, you are harder to throw off balance. You may still need to adjust in real time, but you are not starting from zero. You are adapting from a prepared foundation. This is what athletes do before competition. This is what great speakers do before stepping on stage. This is what skilled leaders do before important decisions. This is what strong negotiators do before difficult meetings. They do not trust pressure to bring out their best automatically. They train for the moment before the moment arrives. That principle applies to life as well. If you want better conversations, prepare better. If you want calmer communication, prepare your mind before the emotion rises. If you want more confidence in asking for what you need, prepare your language before the opportunity appears. If you want to negotiate well, prepare your value, your facts, your boundaries, and your alternatives. If you want to handle difficult truth with grace, prepare your heart before speaking. Preparation is not fear. Preparation is wisdom. Some people avoid preparing because they think it means they are weak or overly anxious. But the opposite is true. Preparation is one of the strongest things you can do. It says, "This matters enough for me to take seriously. My message matters enough to organize. My future matters enough to approach with intention. I respect this moment too much to leave it entirely to mood." That mindset alone can change the way you move through life. You stop feeling like a victim of high-pressure moments and start becoming an architect of them. You stop hoping confidence will appear and start building it deliberately. You stop entering important conversations empty-handed and start carrying the strength of reflection, clarity, and readiness. And slowly, your relationship with pressure begins to change. You still feel it, but you no longer fear it the same way. You still respect the moment, but you stop worshipping it. You still care deeply, but you stop letting that care turn into chaos. Because now you understand something powerful. Confidence is not an accident. It is the result of choices made beforehand. So let this become part of the way you live. Before the interview, prepare. Before the negotiation, prepare. Before the boundary, prepare. Before the hard truth, prepare. Before the important ask, prepare. Before the conversation that could change your life, prepare. Think, write, practice, breathe, clarify, center yourself, enter with intention. Not because preparation guarantees a perfect result, but because it gives you the best chance to show up as your strongest self. And that is the real goal. Not flawless performance, not controlling every reaction, not eliminating every trace of fear. The goal is to walk into meaningful moments with enough readiness that anxiety no longer owns the room before you speak. The goal is to meet pressure with preparation, to meet uncertainty with clarity, to meet fear with structure, to meet the conversation with the version of you who cared enough to get ready. Because that is where calm begins. That is where control begins. That is where confidence is truly born, long before the first word is spoken. Chapter 7. From Conflict to Collaboration. Conflict is one of the most misunderstood parts of life. Most people hear that word and immediately feel tension. They think of raised voices, broken trust, emotional distance, power struggles, hurt pride, and painful misunderstandings. They think of moments when people stop listening and start defending. Moments when winning becomes more important than understanding. Moments when relationships grow colder, workplaces become heavier, and simple issues become emotional battles. Because of that, many people spend their lives trying to avoid conflict altogether. They stay quiet when they should speak. They agree when they actually disagree. They bury frustration to keep the peace. They smile while resentment quietly grows inside them. They tell themselves it is better not to say anything, better not to make things difficult, better not to disturb the atmosphere. But avoiding conflict does not create real peace. It only delays truth. And delayed truth has a way of becoming heavier. The truth is, conflict is not always the enemy. Unresolved conflict is the enemy. Ego-driven conflict is the enemy. Careless conflict is the enemy. But conflict itself is not always a sign that something is breaking. Sometimes it is a sign that something important is trying to be understood. Sometimes it is the doorway to clarity. Sometimes it is the beginning of healthier expectations, stronger communication, deeper trust, and better outcomes. That is why one of the most powerful skills you can ever build is the ability to move from conflict to collaboration. This is where maturity shows itself. Not in avoiding every disagreement, not in dominating every argument, but in learning how to enter tension without losing respect, how to face differences without creating damage, and how to turn competing positions into shared progress. Because life will always bring moments of friction. Two people will want different things. Two co-workers will see a problem differently. Two family members will carry different emotional histories into the same conversation. Two partners will have different expectations, needs, and ways of responding under stress. A customer and a business will each care about their own concerns. A leader and a team member may disagree on priorities. Conflict is natural wherever people, emotions, goals, and perspectives meet. So the question is not whether conflict will happen, The question is, what kind of person you will become when it does. Will you become reactive, defensive, proud, and rigid? Or will you become steady, curious, clear, and solution-focused? That difference shapes everything, because in every conflict, there are usually two levels. There is the visible issue on the surface, and there is the deeper emotional experience underneath it. On the surface, people may be arguing about time, money, effort, communication, decisions, or responsibility. But underneath, the real issue may be respect, fear, trust, recognition, disappointment, pressure, or the need to feel heard. This is where many conflicts go wrong. People fight over positions instead of understanding needs. They become obsessed with proving their point instead of uncovering the truth beneath the tension. One person says, "You never listen." The other says, "That's not true." And immediately the conflict becomes about defending identity instead of solving the actual pain. But collaboration begins when someone becomes wise enough to ask, what is really happening here? What is this person trying to protect, express, or achieve? What am I trying to protect, express, or achieve? Is there a deeper need beneath this disagreement? Those questions are powerful because they shift the energy of the conversation. They move you away from attack and toward understanding. They move you away from blame and toward discovery. They move you away from the small goal of being right and toward the larger goal of making progress. And that is what win-win outcomes are really built on. Many people misunderstand the phrase win-win. They hear it and imagine a weak compromise where nobody gets what they really want. Or they think it is unrealistic because life is competitive and somebody must lose. But real win-win is not about pretending differences do not exist. It is about finding an outcome where dignity remains, value is created, and both sides leave stronger than they would have through pure confrontation. That does not always mean both sides get everything. It means both sides are respected. It means the solution is thoughtful. It means the outcome considers more than ego. It means the interaction builds something instead of merely settling a score. This is a far more powerful way to live. Imagine a disagreement at work. One person wants speed. Another wants accuracy. On the surface, they seem opposed. One thinks the other is slowing everything down. The other thinks one is being careless. If both stay attached only to their position, conflict grows. But if they go deeper, they may realize that both are trying to protect the success of the project. One values momentum, the other values quality. Now the conversation changes. Instead of fighting each other, they can start solving the real challenge together. How do we move efficiently without sacrificing standards? That is collaboration. It happens when people stop treating each other as the problem and start treating the problem as something they can face together. That mindset can transform almost any interaction. In relationships, it sounds like this. Not, "You are the problem," but, "We need to solve what is happening between us." In business, it sounds like this. Not, "I need to beat you," but, "How do we structure this in a way that creates value for both sides?" In leadership, it sounds like this. Not, "Do it my way because I said so," but, "Let's get clear on the goal and find the smartest path forward." In families, it sounds like this. Not, "I have to win this argument," but, "How do we protect the relationship while also telling the truth?" This shift from opposition to shared problem solving is one of the greatest emotional and strategic upgrades a person can make. But it requires something many people struggle with. It requires emotional discipline, because conflict activates the ego very quickly. When people feel challenged, disrespected, blamed, or misunderstood, the instinct is to protect themselves. The voice tightens, the heart races, the mind starts building a case. Listening becomes weaker, defensiveness becomes stronger. Suddenly the goal is no longer progress. The goal is survival. The goal is proving innocence. The goal is making sure the other person does not gain ground. That is why emotionally immature conflict feels like war. Every sentence becomes a weapon. Every misunderstanding becomes evidence. Every disagreement becomes personal. And when that happens, collaboration disappears. So if you want better outcomes, you must learn to regulate yourself in conflict. You must learn how to pause before reacting, how to hear criticism without instantly becoming combative, how to notice when pride is rising, how to stay connected to the larger purpose of the conversation, how to remind yourself, I am here to solve, not just to defend. That kind of self-control is not weakness, it is strength in refined form. It protects relationships, it protects opportunities, it protects your credibility, it protects the possibility of resolution. Another essential part of moving from conflict to collaboration is listening with real intent. Not waiting for your turn, not pretending to listen while building your reply, not listening only for what is wrong. Real listening, the kind that wants to understand what the other person actually means, not just what you fear they mean. This kind of listening changes people. When someone feels truly heard, their defensiveness often softens, their tone changes, their body relaxes, their need to keep repeating themselves decreases. Why? Because one of the deepest human needs is the need to feel understood, not necessarily agreed with at every point, but understood. And when people do not feel understood, they intensify, they repeat, they push harder, they get louder emotionally, because they are trying to break through the wall they feel in front of them. But when they feel heard, collaboration becomes more possible. This does not mean you abandon your own position. It means you create space for clarity before pushing for solutions. Sometimes a simple sentence can change the entire direction of a conflict. I can see why that frustrated you. I understand that this mattered to you. Let me make sure I'm hearing you correctly. I don't agree with every part yet, but I do want to understand your perspective. These kinds of responses do not weaken your position, they strengthen the conversation. Because people are far more open to working with someone who is trying to understand than someone who is only trying to win. This is especially important when emotions are high. When people are emotional, they often do not need immediate correction as much as they need stabilization. They need to feel the conversation is safe enough to continue. They need to sense that they are not about to be humiliated, dismissed, or crushed. Once that safety exists, logic can re-enter the room, solutions can reappear. But without that emotional grounding, even smart ideas struggle to land. This is why timing matters too. Not every conflict should be addressed the moment emotion spikes. Some conversations need a pause, some need breath, some need space for people to regulate before they can think clearly. Wisdom is knowing the difference between avoiding a conflict and approaching it at a better time. A rushed conversation with flooded emotions often creates more damage than progress, but a thoughtful pause, used correctly, can create better collaboration later. It says, this matters, and I want to come back to it well. That is very different from silence that abandons the issue. Collaboration also requires flexibility. Rigid people struggle in conflict because they enter every disagreement believing that movement equals weakness. They think adjusting means losing. They think considering another perspective means surrendering their own. But in truth, flexibility is often what makes stronger outcomes possible. If you care only about your original form of victory, you may miss a better result that serves everyone more deeply. Sometimes collaboration means changing the method while protecting the principle. Sometimes it means letting go of a small preference to preserve a larger goal. Sometimes it means realizing that your idea is not the only path to success. Sometimes it means asking, what outcome are we really trying to create here? And then becoming creative enough to pursue that outcome together. This is where collaboration becomes powerful. It creates more than compromise. It creates possibility. Instead of shrinking the outcome to end the disagreement, it expands the thinking so a better solution can emerge. That is what great leaders do. That is what strong partners do. That is what emotionally mature people do. They do not enter conflict asking only, how do I get my way? They ask, how do we move forward in a way that creates strength, clarity, respect, and progress? This mindset does not only improve relationships, it improves results. In business, win-win thinking builds longer-lasting deals because both sides feel value. In teams, it builds more trust because people feel included rather than overruled. In families, it builds more openness because people feel safe bringing up real concerns. In friendships, it builds deeper respect because truth can be spoken without fear of destruction. In romantic relationships, it turns arguments into understanding and tension into growth. And perhaps just as importantly, Collaboration protects your inner peace because constant adversarial living is exhausting. Always fighting to win, always needing the last word, always viewing disagreement as danger, always interpreting different perspectives as threats. That way of living hardens the heart. It creates tension inside you, even when the room is quiet. But collaborative strength is different. It is steady. It is confident. It does not need to dominate in order to feel secure. It knows how to stand firm without turning everything into a contest. It knows how to protect truth without humiliating people. It knows how to create progress without carrying unnecessary emotional damage. Now, of course, not every interaction will become collaborative. This is an important truth. Some people are not ready. Some are committed to control, not understanding. Some are too emotionally reactive to engage with maturity. Some are dishonest. Some only want outcomes that serve themselves. In those situations, collaboration may not fully happen, and win-win may not be possible in the ideal sense. But even then, your mindset still matters. You can remain collaborative in spirit without becoming naive. You can stay respectful without becoming passive. You can seek a healthy outcome while still holding boundaries. And when the other side refuses dignity, honesty, or fairness, sometimes the win-win becomes this. You leave the interaction with your self-respect intact, your clarity preserved, and your standards unbroken. That too is a powerful outcome. Because collaboration is not about pleasing everyone, it is about approaching conflict with maturity, wisdom, and the desire to create value wherever possible. And the more you practice this, the more your life changes. You become less afraid of difficult conversations. You become less threatened by disagreement. You become more skillful at navigating tension. You become someone who can calm a room instead of inflaming it. Someone who can ask better questions. Someone who can uncover what really matters. Someone who can move people from positions to purpose. Someone who can take a moment that might have turned divisive and turn it into something constructive. That is a rare kind of strength. It is the strength of people who understand that the highest level of influence is not forcing outcomes. It is creating alignment. It is helping people see that progress does not have to come through damage. It is proving that truth and respect can live in the same conversation. It is showing that differences do not have to destroy connection. So when conflict appears in your life, do not automatically fear it. Do not assume tension means failure. Do not assume disagreement means the relationship, the opportunity, or the goal is collapsing. Instead, ask a better question. Ask, how can this become a doorway to deeper understanding? How can I bring steadiness here? How can I listen well, speak clearly, and search for a solution larger than my ego? That is where transformation begins. That is where stronger outcomes are born. That is where conflict stops being merely a battle and becomes a chance to build something better. And when you learn to live this way, you discover one of the greatest powers in human interaction, the ability to turn friction into forward movement, misunderstanding into clarity, and conflict into collaboration. Because real success is not just about how often you win against people. It is about how often you can create wins with them. And that is the kind of strength that changes everything. Chapter 8. Career, Money and Opportunity. There comes a point in life when effort alone no longer feels like enough. You work hard, you show up, you learn, you stay committed, you do what is asked, you try to be dependable, you try to be valuable. Yet even with all that effort, many people eventually realize something uncomfortable. Hard work by itself does not always create the opportunities, income, or growth they hoped for. That realization can be frustrating. Because most people are taught to believe that if they simply do good work, life will automatically reward them. They are told to keep their head down, stay humble, wait their turn, and trust that the right people will notice. Sometimes that happens, but many times it does not. Not because talent has no value, but because value often needs to be communicated, positioned, and negotiated before it can be fully recognized. This is where career, money, and opportunity begin to change. Not when a person becomes louder, not when they become arrogant, not when they start chasing success with desperation, But when they understand that negotiation is not separate from professional growth, it is part of professional growth, it is part of earning more, advancing further, building smarter, and creating a life where effort is matched by outcomes. Many people hear the word negotiation and immediately think only of salary discussions. But in truth, negotiation reaches into every part of work and business. It shapes the role you accept, the expectations you clarify, the responsibilities you carry, the partnerships you build, the clients you attract, the prices you set, the opportunities you pursue, and the respect you earn along the way. A career is not built only through competence. It is built through competence plus communication. Money is not influenced only by effort. It is influenced by effort plus value, plus the ability to express that value. Opportunity does not always go to the most deserving person in silence. Very often, it goes to the prepared person who knows how to ask, position, respond, and negotiate wisely. That may sound uncomfortable at first, especially to those who have spent years believing that speaking up about money or advancement somehow makes them selfish. But this belief keeps far too many capable people living beneath their potential. They hesitate to ask for more because they do not want to seem difficult. They downplay their contribution because they fear looking proud. They accept unclear expectations because they want to appear easy to work with. They avoid salary discussions because money feels emotionally charged. They enter business deals without clarity because they are afraid of losing the opportunity altogether. Then later, they wonder why they feel underpaid, undervalued, overworked, or overlooked. The answer is often not that they lacked worth. It is that they failed to negotiate their worth with enough clarity, courage, and strategy. This is one of the great professional lessons of life. The marketplace responds not only to what you can do, but to how clearly you can connect what you do to value. That matters deeply because employers, clients, customers, and partners are not only asking, "Are you talented?" They are asking, "What problem do you solve? What value do you create? Why does your contribution matter? Why should I invest in you, trust you, promote you, or pay you more?" If you do not know how to answer those questions, someone less capable, but more prepared, may move ahead of you. That is not always fair, but it is real. And once you understand that, you stop relying only on hope. You start building leverage. You start becoming intentional. You stop assuming that your effort should magically explain itself. You begin learning how to articulate results, frame your contribution, understand the other side's priorities, and negotiate from strength rather than insecurity. This shift changes careers. Think about the person who stays in the same role year after year, quietly doing excellent work. They believe their dedication should be obvious. They assume promotions should happen naturally. They wait for leadership to notice every extra effort, every problem solved, every late night, every quiet act of responsibility. But leadership is often busy. Systems are imperfect. Organizations do not always reward invisible value. So unless that person learns how to communicate what they bring, connect their work to measurable impact, and ask for growth, they may remain stuck while others advance. This is why professional negotiation is not only about asking for more money. It is also about asking better questions. What does advancement look like here? What skills would make me a stronger candidate for the next level? How is success measured in this role? Where am I creating the most value? What gaps should I close to be considered for greater responsibility? What does leadership most need from someone stepping into the next position? Questions like these turn a passive career into an active one. They show maturity. They show ambition without arrogance. They signal that you are thinking like someone who wants to grow, not just someone who wants to be comfortable. And growth belongs to people who learn how to engage with opportunity before it arrives fully formed. The same truth applies to salary. For many people, salary conversations bring emotional discomfort because money feels personal. It touches identity, survival, worth, comparison, and fear all at once. Some people feel guilty for wanting more. Others feel anxious about being rejected. Some worry they will damage relationships by bringing up compensation. Others fear that one awkward conversation will make them seem ungrateful. But avoiding money conversations does not make money issues disappear. It often makes them worse. Because when compensation is never discussed honestly, resentment can grow in silence. A person starts giving more while feeling unseen. They compare themselves to others. They question their future. Their motivation weakens. Their energy drops. All because a conversation that required courage was postponed too long. The wiser path is to approach salary with preparation and professionalism. Not with entitlement, not with desperation, with clarity. A strong salary discussion is rarely built on emotion alone. It is built on value. It is built on contribution. It is built on timing, evidence, and an understanding of the business context. It asks, what results have I created? What problems have I solved? How have I increased efficiency, revenue, customer satisfaction, team performance, or operational strength? What responsibilities am I already carrying beyond the original role? What is the market paying for this level of work? What is a fair and sustainable next step? This matters because people respond better when your ask is connected to outcomes rather than vague desire. Saying, "I need more money," may be emotionally true, but it is often not enough. Saying, "Over the past year, I have taken on these responsibilities, delivered these outcomes, and contributed in these measurable ways, and I'd like to discuss aligning my compensation with that level of value," is far stronger. That is not arrogance. That is professional clarity. That is negotiation rooted in evidence. And even if the answer is not immediately yes, the conversation still matters, because a well-handled negotiation gives you information. It shows you how your value is being perceived. It reveals whether advancement is realistic, whether the organization has limits, whether timing is the issue, or whether you may need to grow elsewhere. In that sense, negotiation is not just about the answer, it is about visibility, positioning, and truth. Business growth works the same way. Many business owners struggle not because they lack a good product or service, but because they negotiate from fear. They underprice because they are afraid clients will walk away. They say yes to unreasonable demands because they do not want to lose the deal. They fail to define terms clearly because they are desperate for the opportunity. They over-deliver without boundaries, hoping generosity will guarantee loyalty. But business built on unclear agreements and fearful negotiation often becomes exhausting. Because when you do not define your value, others will often define it downward. When you do not set terms, terms get set around you. When you do not communicate expectations, confusion becomes expensive. Strong business growth requires a different posture. It requires understanding that clarity builds trust more than vagueness ever will. Clients, partners, and collaborators may not always like every limit, but healthy people respect structure. They respect confidence. They respect businesses that know what they offer, what it costs, how the process works, and where the boundaries are. This is why negotiation in business is not only about winning the deal, it is about building sustainable relationships. A business that says yes to everything may close some deals, but it may also create burnout, low margins, unclear standards, and constant frustration. A business that knows its value, communicates it well, and negotiates from principle creates stronger foundations. It attracts better fit clients. It protects energy. It preserves quality. It builds credibility. That kind of negotiation leads to better money because it is tied to better positioning. Opportunity also responds to this mindset. Many people wait for opportunity as if it should arrive like a surprise gift. They hope someone will discover them, recommend them, promote them, or hand them the chance they have been quietly dreaming about. Sometimes life works that way, but more often, opportunity grows around people who know how to initiate. They reach out, they ask for the meeting, they propose the partnership, they pitch the idea, they follow up, they introduce themselves, they communicate interest, they position their value where it can be seen. In other words, they negotiate their way into visibility. This does not mean forcing every door. It means understanding that many doors never open for those who only wait. The modern world rewards initiative. It rewards people who can combine preparation with courage, value with communication, and skill with strategic action. A person may have the ability to lead, but unless they step into conversations that show readiness, Leadership may remain hidden. A person may have the talent to build a business, but unless they learn how to present, sell, and negotiate, that talent may never become income. A person may deserve better opportunities, but unless they become willing to pursue them actively, they may remain known only for potential instead of progress. This is why negotiation must also be internal. Before you negotiate with employers, clients, markets, or partners, you must negotiate with your own fear. You must confront the voices that say, "Don't ask, don't risk it, don't make it uncomfortable, don't charge that much, don't believe you're ready, don't put yourself out there. Stay safe, stay quiet, stay where you are." If those voices keep winning, then no external strategy will fully help you. Career growth requires inner permission. Financial growth requires inner expansion. Opportunity often arrives when a person becomes willing to be seen at a higher level than they have allowed before. That inner shift is powerful. It changes how you prepare. It changes how you speak. It changes how you price. It changes what you tolerate. It changes which offers you accept and which you decline. It changes how you walk into rooms. And over time, those changes shape income, influence, and direction. There is another truth here that matters deeply. Negotiation is not just about getting more, it is also about building wisely. Some people chase bigger numbers but make poor agreements. They get the job but accept unclear expectations. They land the client but agree to impossible timelines. They increase revenue but destroy margins. They take on opportunities that look impressive but quietly drain their energy, values, or peace. This is why smart negotiation asks not only, "How do I get this?" but also, "Is this good for me? Is this sustainable? Is this aligned? Does this create real progress or only temporary excitement?" Money without clarity can become stress. Opportunity without alignment can become regret. Career advancement without boundaries can become burnout. So mature negotiation is not driven only by hunger, it is guided by wisdom. It understands that saying yes to the wrong thing can cost more than not getting the thing at all. This is especially important as you grow. Early in a career or business journey, it is natural to want every chance. But over time, discernment becomes part of success. Not every offer deserves acceptance. Not every client deserves access. Not every role deserves your talent. Not every partnership deserves your trust. Negotiation helps you decide what belongs in your future and what only distracts from it. That is real power. The most effective professionals and business builders are often not those who chase everything. They are those who understand leverage, alignment, and timing. They know when to push, when to wait, when to ask, when to walk, and when to build more value before making the next move. They are strategic. They think long-term. They understand that credibility compounds. Relationships compound, skill compounds, and wise negotiation compounds too. So if you want a stronger career, learn to articulate your value. If you want more money, learn to connect your ask to outcomes. If you want better business growth, learn to define your terms and price with clarity. If you want more opportunity, stop waiting passively and start engaging intentionally. If you want to rise, stop assuming the world will always explain your worth for you. Learn to explain it yourself with calm conviction. Learn to speak in the language of value. Learn to prepare before the conversation. Learn to ask questions that reveal the path forward. Learn to treat negotiation not as conflict, but as conscious participation in your future. Because that is what career, money, and opportunity really are. They are not random rewards handed only to the lucky. They are shaped through skill, mindset, communication, courage, and consistency. They are shaped by how well you understand your worth, how wisely you create value, and how clearly you engage with the systems around you. And yes, life will not always say yes. Some employers will not recognize your value. Some clients will not understand your pricing. Some opportunities will close. Some markets will be difficult. Some conversations will not go your way. But that does not mean negotiation failed. Every thoughtful negotiation teaches you something. It sharpens your clarity. It strengthens your self-respect. It helps you see what is aligned and what is not. It trains you to carry yourself with greater professionalism and intention. And eventually, all of that compounds into stronger outcomes, because the person who learns to negotiate wisely becomes harder to overlook. They stop moving through work like someone hoping to be chosen. They start moving like someone prepared to create value, communicate it, and build from it. They stop treating money as a taboo subject and start treating it as a reflection of value, structure, and strategy. They stop waiting for opportunity to appear perfectly and start participating in its creation. That is the shift. That is the moment a person moves from passive effort to active growth. So let this truth stay with you. Your career is not only built by what you do. It is built by how well you position, communicate, and negotiate what you do. Your income is not only influenced by effort, it is influenced by how clearly your effort is tied to value. Your opportunities are not only a matter of chance. They are shaped by how willing you are to ask, prepare, respond, and step forward. You have more power here than you think. Power to grow your skill. Power to clarify your value. Power to ask better questions. Power to negotiate better terms. Power to create healthier agreements. Power to pursue the next level with greater courage. Power to stop shrinking around money and start approaching it with maturity. Power to stop waiting for the room to define you and start defining yourself through the value you bring. That power must be used wisely, but it must be used. Because a bigger professional life does not usually belong to those who only work harder. It belongs to those who learn how to work, communicate, and negotiate smarter. And when you do that, career, money, and opportunity stop feeling like distant rewards controlled only by others. They begin to feel like something you can influence, something you can build, something you can grow into, something you can shape with vision, courage, and skill. That is how real progress begins, not just by earning a living, but by learning how to create a life where your value is seen, your work is respected, and your opportunities grow in proportion to the strength, clarity, and wisdom with which you pursue them. Chapter 9. Negotiation in Relationships and Daily Life. When most people hear the word negotiation, they imagine money, contracts, salaries, business deals, and high-pressure conversations where someone is trying to gain an advantage. But some of the most important negotiations in life do not happen in offices or conference rooms. They happen at the dinner table, in text messages, in quiet disagreements, in unmet expectations, in the way two people decide how to spend time, share responsibilities, express hurt, give support, ask for space, and repair trust. In other words, some of the most meaningful negotiations in life happen in relationships. They happen in marriage, in friendship, in family, in parenting, between siblings, between neighbors, between co-workers, between anyone trying to build a life with other human beings who have their own feelings, needs, habits, fears, and expectations. And this is why negotiation in daily life matters so much. Because relationships are not strengthened only by love. They are strengthened by understanding. They are strengthened by communication. They are strengthened by the ability to navigate differences without turning every difference into distance. They are strengthened by the ability to say, we are not on opposite sides. We are simply trying to understand each other well enough to move forward together. That is a beautiful kind of strength. Many relationships do not fail because there was no care. They fail because there was not enough clarity, not enough listening, not enough empathy, not enough courage to speak honestly before hurt hardened into resentment. People often assume that if love is real, understanding should happen naturally. They think closeness should eliminate the need for careful communication. They believe the other person should just know. But that belief has damaged countless connections, because even people who care deeply for each other cannot read each other's minds. They cannot automatically interpret silence correctly. They cannot always see the emotional meaning behind behavior unless it is communicated. And when assumptions replace conversation, small misunderstandings can slowly become heavy emotional burdens. That is why daily life itself is a kind of negotiation. When two people discuss how to spend money, they are negotiating values. When partners decide how to divide responsibilities, they are negotiating fairness. When friends navigate disappointment, they are negotiating trust. When parents and children work through rules, freedom, and expectations, they are negotiating growth and respect. When family members manage time, traditions, space, and boundaries, they are negotiating connection. Everyday life is filled with these moments, and the quality of your relationships is deeply shaped by how you handle them. Many people think relationship negotiation means conflict. But healthy negotiation is not constant arguing. It is the ongoing process of making room for both truth and connection. It is how two people with different minds, different personalities, different emotional histories, and different desires learn how to share life without losing dignity, honesty, or respect. This is where empathy becomes powerful. Empathy is one of the greatest forces in human connection because it changes the energy of an interaction. It says, "I may not fully agree yet, but I want to understand what this feels like from your side." It says, "Your experience matters enough for me to pause and listen." It says, "I am not only here to defend my view, I am here to see yours too." And when people feel truly understood, something inside them softens. They may still feel hurt, they may still feel emotional, they may still need change, but understanding lowers the emotional temperature. It reduces the need to fight for basic recognition. It creates a bridge where there was only pressure. Often, people become far more willing to work toward a solution once they feel their inner reality has been acknowledged. This is one of the hidden truths of strong relationships. Many arguments are not really about the surface issue alone. They are about the emotional meaning beneath it. A person may say, "You're always late," but what they may be feeling is, "I don't feel considered." A partner may complain, "You never help around the house," but beneath that may be, "I feel alone in carrying this life with you." A friend may grow distant after a cancelled plan, not because the plan mattered most, but because the deeper feeling was, "I don't feel important to you right now." A parent may sound harsh about behavior, but underneath may be fear, responsibility, and deep concern. If you only respond to the surface words, you may miss the heart of the matter. But if you listen with empathy, you begin hearing what is underneath, and that changes everything. This does not mean empathy requires you to agree with everything. It does not mean you must accept poor behavior or abandon your own truth. Empathy is not surrender, it is understanding. It is the discipline of listening deeply enough to hear the emotional reality behind the words without immediately making the conversation a battle. That is why empathy and communication must work together. Empathy without communication can become silent understanding that never leads to change. Communication without empathy can become truth delivered without care. But when both are present, relationships become stronger. People feel safer. Honesty becomes more possible. Problems become more solvable. Trust deepens because both sides feel seen rather than managed. Nowhere is this more important than in the small, daily moments that people often underestimate. A relationship is not usually shaped only by dramatic events. It is shaped by repeated interactions. The tone you use when you are tired, the way you respond when frustrated, the willingness to clarify instead of assume, the effort to ask instead of accuse, the choice to express appreciation instead of only pointing out problems. These daily patterns are negotiating the emotional atmosphere of the relationship. Some people keep negotiating life in ways that weaken connection without realizing it. They use silence instead of honesty. They withdraw instead of explaining. They become passive-aggressive instead of direct. They expect others to guess what they need. They store disappointments until they explode. They bring old wounds into present conversations without awareness. Then they wonder why simple relationships feel so heavy. The reason is that every unspoken truth eventually creates pressure, and pressure, when ignored, becomes distance. This is why healthy daily life negotiation begins with emotional honesty. Not dramatic honesty, not reckless honesty, used as an excuse to say hurtful things. Grounded honesty, the kind that says, "This bothered me and I don't want to leave it unspoken." The kind that says, "I know you may not have meant harm, but this affected me." The kind that says, "I need more support here." The kind that says, "Can we talk about what happened? I don't want resentment to grow." These kinds of conversations protect connection because they prevent hidden hurt from becoming long-term damage. Many people are afraid of these moments because they associate honesty with conflict. But honest communication, when done with care, is often what prevents larger conflict later. Silence may feel peaceful in the moment, but silence often sends the pain underground, where it grows stronger and harder to address. Healthy relationships do not require the absence of tension. They require the ability to move through tension with respect. That means learning how to speak clearly without attacking. Instead of saying, "You never care," say, "I felt hurt when that happened, and I need us to talk about it." Instead of saying, "You always make everything about you," say, "I'm struggling to feel heard in this conversation." Instead of saying, "Nobody helps me," say, "I'm carrying more than I can manage, and I need support." This kind of language matters because it gives the other person something they can understand and respond to, instead of something they can only defend against. When people feel attacked, their instinct is to protect themselves. When people feel invited into understanding, their instinct is more likely to open. That is how communication strengthens personal connections. It creates a path forward. And still, there is another important part of relationship negotiation: boundaries. Love without boundaries becomes exhaustion. Friendship without boundaries becomes imbalance. Family connection without boundaries can become emotional confusion. Daily life requires the ability to say, with love and clarity, what you can carry and what you cannot. Many people damage their relationships by trying to avoid disappointment at all costs. They say yes when they mean no. They overextend themselves. They give from guilt instead of generosity. They tolerate repeated disrespect to keep the peace. Then over time, their kindness becomes resentment because it was never supported by honest boundaries. A healthy boundary is not rejection. It is information. It says, "This is what I'm available for." It says, "This is how I need to be treated." It says, "I love you, but I cannot do this in the same way anymore." It says, "I want closeness, but I also need respect." Strong relationships can survive boundaries. In fact, strong relationships often become stronger because of them. Boundaries create structure, and structure protects connection. They help people understand what love looks like in practice. They teach others how to stay close to you without carelessly stepping over your peace. Another part of daily negotiation is learning how to handle differences without turning them into personal threats. Not everyone loves the same way. Not everyone communicates the same way. Not everyone needs the same amount of space, affection, reassurance, or routine. These differences do not automatically mean a relationship is broken, but they do mean that understanding must be built intentionally. One person may need time to think before talking. Another may want to address things immediately. One may show care through practical help. Another may show care through words and presence. One may be more expressive. Another may be quieter and slower to open. Problems begin when people treat difference as disrespect instead of something to understand. This is where negotiation becomes a daily act of maturity. Instead of insisting that love must look exactly like your style, you learn to ask, how do we meet each other better? How do we understand each other's needs without dismissing our own? How do we create shared language where our natural habits are different? These questions strengthen relationships because they move people away from ego and toward collaboration. It becomes less about, "Why aren't you like me?" and more about, "How do we care for each other well from where we each stand?" That is real connection. That is mature love. That is friendship with depth. That is family life with more wisdom. And this does not only apply to close relationships, it applies to daily life more broadly. The cashier, the neighbor, the colleague, the service provider, the teammate, the person on the other end of a stressful moment. Everyday interactions are also shaped by how you negotiate emotion and communication. A little patience can de-escalate tension. A little respect can preserve dignity. A little empathy can turn an irritating exchange into a human one. These moments may seem small, but they shape the atmosphere of your life. People who carry emotional awareness into daily interactions often experience better outcomes, not because life becomes perfect, but because they bring steadiness where chaos could have grown. They know how to ask instead of assume. They know how to clarify instead of accuse. They know how to slow down instead of reacting blindly. This does not make them weak, it makes them wise. There is also great power in learning the art of repair. No relationship is perfect. No one communicates perfectly every day. There will be misunderstandings. There will be wrong tone, missed signals, forgotten efforts, emotional moments, and imperfect reactions. The strength of a relationship is often revealed not by whether mistakes happen, but by whether repair happens afterward. Can you say, "I see how that affected you"? Can you say, "I was wrong in how I handled that"? Can you say, "That wasn't my intention, but I understand you're hurt"? Can you say, "Let's reset and do this better"? Repair is one of the most healing forces in human connection because it tells the other person, "This relationship matters more to me than my pride." Pride keeps people distant. Repair brings them back. And when repair becomes normal, relationships become more resilient. People stop fearing that one hard moment means the end. They begin trusting that truth can be spoken, mistakes can be owned, and connection can be rebuilt. That is a powerful emotional safety. Of course, this kind of negotiation requires humility. Humility is essential in daily life because no one sees everything clearly all the time. No one is fully right in every conflict. No one is beyond misunderstanding. Humility allows you to listen without feeling smaller. It allows you to admit fault without collapsing in shame. It allows you to hold your truth while still remaining open to growth. Without humility, every relationship becomes a courtroom. With humility, relationships become places of learning, and that learning deepens connection over time. The goal is not to become perfect in every conversation. The goal is to become more conscious, more empathetic, more clear, more willing to understand before reacting, more willing to speak before resentment grows, more willing to set boundaries before burnout takes over, more willing to repair before distance hardens. That is how personal connections become stronger. Not through grand gestures alone, but through repeated acts of emotional maturity, a calmer response, a clearer boundary, a kinder tone, a more honest sentence, a more curious question, a more thoughtful pause, a more generous interpretation, a more sincere apology, a more courageous conversation. These are the daily negotiations that shape the emotional quality of life. So let this truth settle in your heart. Every relationship is asking for wisdom, not only love, but wisdom, not only intention, but communication, not only care, but empathy expressed in a way the other person can feel. The strongest connections are rarely built by accident. They are built by people who learn how to navigate life together with truth, respect, and the willingness to understand what matters beneath the surface. That can be you. You can become the kind of person who brings more peace into conversations, the kind of person who listens deeply, the kind of person who speaks clearly, the kind of person who does not let hurt quietly poison connection, the kind of person who values understanding more than ego, the kind of person who can hold both truth and tenderness at once. That kind of person changes the atmosphere around them. They strengthen families, they deepen friendships, they improve partnerships, they bring maturity into ordinary moments. They turn daily life from a series of misunderstandings into a place where people feel heard, valued, and respected. And in the end, that is what negotiation in relationships and daily life is really about. It is not about controlling people. It is not about winning every disagreement. It is not about always getting your way. It is about building connection strong enough to hold honesty. It is about creating trust strong enough to survive truth. It is about using empathy and communication to make love more practical, respect more visible, and daily life more peaceful. Because the people closest to you do not only need your good intentions, they need your understanding. They need your clarity. They need your courage to communicate what matters. And when you learn to bring those things into your relationships, you do not just improve conversations. You improve the entire emotional texture of life. That is a beautiful skill. That is a powerful way to love. And that is how personal connections become strong enough not only to survive daily life, but to grow through it. Chapter 10. Living as someone who knows their worth. There comes a moment in every person's life when something inside begins to shift. It may not happen all at once. It may not come with applause, dramatic music, or some perfect external victory. Often it happens quietly, deep within, in the private place where a person grows tired of shrinking, tired of doubting, tired of apologizing for their own needs, tired of living beneath the level of truth they can feel in their spirit. At first, the shift is almost invisible. A person starts noticing how often they stay silent when they should speak, How often they say yes when they mean no. How often they settle for crumbs because they are afraid to ask for a full table. How often they explain away disrespect, delay their dreams, lower their expectations, and call it patience when it is really fear. And then one day, something becomes impossible to ignore. They realize the greatest thing they have been negotiating against is not only other people, it is themselves, their old beliefs, their old wounds, their old habits of self-abandonment. That is the moment a new life begins. Because living as someone who knows their worth is not just about getting better outcomes, it is about becoming a different kind of person from the inside out. It is about walking through the world with a new relationship to your own value. It is about understanding that confidence is not arrogance, clarity is not cruelty, and asking for what you deserve is not selfish. It is mature, it is honest, it is necessary. So many people spend years waiting for the world to tell them they matter. They wait for praise, they wait for a title. They wait for love, they wait for money, they wait for recognition. They wait for someone important to choose them, approve of them, validate them, and finally confirm that they have value. But the problem with building your worth on outside confirmation is that your peace becomes fragile. Your confidence rises and falls with opinion. Your voice gets stronger when people applaud and weaker when they do not. Your identity becomes negotiable in the hands of circumstances. That is not freedom. Real freedom begins when your sense of value is no longer entirely rented from the outside world. It begins when you decide that while feedback matters, your soul will not live at the mercy of every response. It begins when you understand that worth is not something you beg others to assign to you. Worth is something you learn to stand in, to honor, to protect, to express. This changes how you live. A person who does not know their worth tends to move through life asking, "Is this okay? Am I okay? Do I deserve to take up space? Do I have the right to ask for more?" But a person who is beginning to know their worth moves differently. They still learn, they still grow, they still stay humble. But beneath all of that is a steadier foundation. They no longer treat themselves like an inconvenience in their own life. They no longer speak as if they are asking permission to exist. They no longer enter every room already prepared to be less. That kind of transformation is powerful. It changes the tone of your voice. It changes the standards of your relationships. It changes the opportunities you pursue. It changes the way you negotiate, the way you recover, the way you carry yourself under pressure. And perhaps most importantly, it changes what you are willing to tolerate. Because once a person truly begins to know their worth, they cannot comfortably return to the old life of chronic self-betrayal. They can no longer ignore the cost of staying silent. They can no longer pretend that endless compromise is kindness when it is actually fear. They can no longer confuse being chosen with being valued. They begin to want something deeper, not just attention, not just acceptance, but alignment. They want relationships where respect is mutual, work where value is recognized, opportunities where contribution and reward are connected, conversations where their voice is present, a life where dignity is not an occasional feeling, but a daily standard. That is what it means to embrace worth. And yet this does not happen by simply repeating positive words in the mirror. It happens through lived decisions. Worth becomes real when it starts showing up in action. It shows up when you say the difficult thing calmly instead of swallowing it again. It shows up when you ask for the opportunity instead of assuming rejection. It shows up when you stop lowering your price just because you are afraid someone will walk away. It shows up when you leave what keeps dishonoring you. It shows up when you prepare for important moments because you believe your future deserves that effort. It shows up when you stop over-explaining healthy boundaries. It shows up when you decide that your dreams are not too much, your needs are not too much, and your voice is not too much. This is how self-worth becomes embodied, not as theory, as practice, as posture, as daily alignment between what you believe and how you live. One of the most beautiful things about knowing your worth is that it creates clarity. When you do not know your worth, everything becomes confusing. You second-guess your instincts. You stay too long in the wrong places. You ask everyone else what they think before trusting what you already feel. You chase what looks impressive instead of what is aligned. You confuse urgency with importance. You confuse being tolerated with being valued. You confuse access with intimacy. You confuse attention with love. But when worth begins to settle inside you, your vision gets clearer. You begin to recognize that not every open door is a good door. Not every opportunity deserves you. Not every connection is healthy. Not every yes is beneficial. Not every delay is rejection. Not every no is loss. You become more discerning. You stop chasing everything. You start choosing with greater wisdom. That clarity protects you. It protects your time. It protects your energy. It protects your peace. It protects your future from being shaped by desperation. Because people who do not know their worth often make decisions from fear of losing. They hold on too tightly to what is draining them because they are afraid of emptiness. They accept less because they are afraid of waiting for better. They keep proving themselves to people who have already shown they cannot honor them. But people who know their worth begin to understand something deeper. Losing what dishonors you is not always a loss. Sometimes it is the beginning of freedom. That realization can change everything. Of course, living as someone who knows their worth does not mean life becomes easy. It does not mean everyone responds well to your growth. In fact, sometimes the moment you begin changing, you feel friction. People who were comfortable with your silence may not like your clarity. People who benefited from your overgiving may not like your boundaries. People who underestimated you may not know what to do when you begin to speak with conviction. And even inside yourself, old fears may still try to rise. You may still hear the old voice that says, "Don't ask, don't push. Don't make this uncomfortable. Don't risk being told no. Don't act like you deserve more." But the difference now is that voice no longer rules you. You recognize it for what it is, an old survival voice, not the voice of your highest truth. And instead of obeying it automatically, you begin answering it with action. You ask anyway. You speak anyway. You apply anyway. You negotiate anyway. You honor yourself anyway. This is courage in its most mature form. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear remain the architect of your life. And that is what confidence really is. Confidence is not loudness. It is not pretending to have no doubts. It is not performing superiority. Real confidence is quieter than that, stronger than that, cleaner than that. Confidence is the settled decision that you will no longer abandon yourself in the moments that matter. It is the ability to stand in uncertainty without collapsing. It is the ability to hear no without hearing I am nothing. It is the ability to walk into important spaces knowing you do not control every outcome, but you do control how honestly and clearly you show up. That kind of confidence is magnetic because it is rooted in truth. It does not beg. It does not chase recklessly. It does not oversell. It does not shrink. It simply stands. It knows how to ask. It knows how to wait. It knows how to walk away when needed. It knows how to try again. It knows that value does not disappear because one person failed to see it. That is a life-changing mindset. And it matters deeply when it comes to asking for what you deserve. For so many people, that is still the hardest part. They may understand their worth in theory, but asking still feels uncomfortable. Asking for the raise, asking for clarity, asking for commitment, asking for better treatment, asking for support, asking for the next opportunity, asking for fair pay, asking for space, asking for honesty, asking for what their heart and effort have earned. Why is this so difficult? Because asking makes things visible. It reveals desire. It reveals standards. It reveals where you stand. And it risks rejection. But there is another side to that truth. Asking also opens possibility. Nothing changes if everything remains hidden. Better relationships are rarely built on unspoken hope. Better compensation is rarely built on invisible effort. Better opportunities are rarely built on silent potential. Asking is how possibility becomes real. Not guaranteed, but real. And when you live as someone who knows their worth, you begin to understand that asking is not an act of greed. It is an act of alignment. It is the outward expression of inward clarity. It says, I know what I bring. I know what I need. I know what matters. And I am willing to bring that truth into the open. That willingness changes your life. Because even when the answer is not what you hoped, you gain something valuable. You gain information. You gain self-respect. You gain freedom from guessing. You gain practice in standing up for your own life. You gain proof that your voice can survive discomfort. This is no small thing. Every time you ask from a place of grounded self-worth, you become stronger. Every time you state a need without drowning it in apology, you become clearer. Every time you hold a boundary without collapsing into guilt, you become freer. Every time you walk away from what consistently diminishes you, you become more aligned. And over time, these moments change your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone waiting to be chosen. You start seeing yourself as someone responsible for participating in your own becoming. That is powerful. That is mature. That is how lives change. There is also a deep peace that comes from living this way. Not because every situation works out perfectly, but because you no longer have to carry the constant pain of self-betrayal. You no longer lie awake replaying what you should have said but did not. You no longer keep swallowing your truth to keep everyone else comfortable. You no longer keep trading long-term peace for short-term approval. Instead, you begin to live with more integrity. What you feel and what you say begin to come closer together. What you value and what you allow begin to come closer together. What you hope for and what you pursue begin to come closer together. That alignment brings peace, and peace is one of the greatest signs that a person is finally living closer to their truth. Now, there will still be lessons ahead. Knowing your worth does not mean you stop growing. It means you grow from a different place, not from shame, not from panic, not from trying to prove you deserve to exist, but from a healthier foundation. You improve because you believe your life is worth improving. You learn because your future matters. You refine your voice because your message matters. You sharpen your skill because excellence honors your potential. You walk away from what drains you because you understand that peace is not laziness and standards are not selfishness. This is the posture of someone who is no longer living in negotiation with their basic value. They are still humble, still teachable, still human, but they are no longer available for the old life that demanded they stay small. And maybe that is the real victory at the end of this journey. Not becoming someone who wins every negotiation. Not becoming someone who controls every room. Not becoming someone who never feels fear, but becoming someone who finally knows this. My voice matters. My effort matters. My boundaries matter. My peace matters. My future matters. I do not need to become cruel to be clear. I do not need to become arrogant to be confident. I do not need to become hard to become strong. I simply need to stop abandoning myself. That truth can carry you a very long way. So from this point forward, live like someone who knows their worth. Prepare for the conversations that matter. Speak with clarity. Listen with wisdom. Ask with courage. Negotiate with self-respect. Love with boundaries. Work with intention. Walk away from what repeatedly dishonors your value. Stay open to growth, but closed to chronic disrespect. Stop apologizing for healthy standards. Stop making your life smaller just to fit the comfort of others. Stop waiting for permission to honor what you already know is true. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to ask for more. You are allowed to build more. You are allowed to become more. And the world often changes the moment you begin carrying yourself like that is true. Because people can feel when someone has stopped negotiating against themselves. They can feel when someone speaks from alignment instead of desperation. They can feel when someone's confidence is no longer borrowed, but built. And even more importantly, you can feel it. You can feel the shift in your own spirit, the steadiness, the clarity, the relief, the strength, the deeper peace that comes from no longer living beneath your own truth. That is what it means to live as someone who knows their worth. It means your life is no longer built around avoiding rejection, pleasing everyone, or staying hidden. It is built around dignity, around courage, around honesty, around the willingness to ask for what you deserve, and the wisdom to keep becoming someone who can carry it well. That is not just the end of a chapter. That is the beginning of a new way to live.